Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Dacorum Borough Council's Development Management Committee. My name is Councillor Garrick Stevens, and I'm the chair of the committee, and our vice chair is Councillor, for the moment, sorry, guest, who's sitting over there. And she will be taking a couple of the items on the agenda. We've got a very long agenda this evening, so we want to crack on. The other members of the committee in attendance at this meeting are Councillors Brom, welcome to this committee, Councillor Brom, Councillor Allen, Bristow, Patterson, Councillor White Lowe, Riddick, Walker, and Councillor Guest, who are sitting on the front here. In attendance, we've got Philip Stanley, who leads the Development Management Committee, and we have a number of the officers who will be presenting this evening. Andrew Parrish, Sally Robbins, Robert Freeman, Heather Eady, Jane Miller, and Rachel Payne. We also have Nargis Sultan here, who is our solicitor. It's accompanied by Lillian Odogwu, who is attending for the first time. And we've got Kaylee Johnson, who is from Support Services, who keeps us on the straight and narrow as well and records our results. The other members of right, we've done that. There are a number of council officers in attendance. We've done that. We're not expecting a fire drill this evening, but if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the ground floor and assemble outside. If the meeting is extended, there may be a comfort break during this meeting at around 9 p.m. and almost certainly we will be beyond that. And before we start, please mute or turn off your mobile phones. Turning to the agenda, first item is the minutes. The previous meeting was on the 10th of April. They have been circulated. Members, do I have your agreement? Do you have any concerns? Can I have them signed after the meeting? Okay, thank you. We have a number of members of the public who have registered to speak, and the list has been circulated. Our normal practice is to bring forward applications where a speaker is present. You will be invited to address the meeting when the item you have registered to speak is to be discussed. The normal procedure and rules in respect of times to speak will apply. The time per speaker is 3 minutes. Where more than one person is speaking on a planning application, the shared time is increased from 3 minutes to 5 minutes, and the 5 minutes will be shared equally unless the sharing of time has been otherwise arranged prior to the meeting. Ward councillors will be entitled to speak for their own 5 minutes to speak. Speakers in objection to the officer's recommendations are taken first. A timer will be displayed on the screen, and times will be strictly enforced. Members of the public will not be entitled to take part in the discussion that follows the public speakers. I have the discretion to remove any member of the public from the meeting if they interrupt, try to engage in discussion, or are abusive. For each application, the officer will present a report to the committee. Then the participants from the public are called to speak. Following this, questions are taken from the committee along with statements and comments for debate. There will be a vote among councillors which will represent the decision of this committee. The first item on the agenda is item 5A, 00549, redevelopment of the former Hemel Hempstead Gasworks site. And Andrew Parrish is going to be presenting on this. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear that? Thank you, Chair. Okay, before members tonight, is a revised scheme following the committee's refusal on 12th of December last year. The proposal is for 485 dwellings. There has been significant pre-application advice leading up to not only this application but previous applications on this site. We had more recent advice given by officers to the applicants in January 2025 following the refused scheme, and that has led to an amended scheme that I will just summarise quickly the main changes. We've got an increase in number of units on the site by 9. That is as a result of using traditional construction methods rather than modular, and allows them to utilise areas of the building blocks that they weren't able to use before. We've got the introduction of some 3-bed units. There's 12 of those now. Previously, we only had 1 and 2-bed units, so now there is a better mix. We've got a 5.5% reduction in the overall building footprint. We've got an increase in communal green space by 0.1 hectare to 1.7 hectares in total. We've got the introduction of an on-site locally equipped area of play, which we didn't have before. We've got an increase in car parking by 34 spaces to 307. 56% of those would be unallocated and 44% allocated. We've got a reduced height of the taller southern blocks by between 1 metre and 2 stories, depending on which block we're talking about, and no more than 8 stories now, whereas previously it was 10 stories. We've got the introduction of an attic story to the northern London Road blocks. Within the attic space, we've got some additional apartments, but the overall height has reduced from the scheme considered back in December 2024. The width has also reduced on those blocks, and the overall scale of those blocks has been also reduced. As a result of that, the proposal will be less prominent in the street scene over long distance views as well as medium distance views. We've also got the introduction of a multi-use communal facilities area at lower ground floor, which we weren't able to have before because they've made use of split levels, which traditional construction has allowed them to do. Modular construction, as before, didn't allow them any flexibility on using split levels. There's many other improvements as well, such as the betterment in balcony space by approximately 400 square metres overall. So why is it a committee? It's a large-scale major development linked to a Section 106 planning obligation. If we, whilst we're on the location plan, I'll just go through the update sheet. So the addendum sheet members will have seen, and some minor corrections to the report, as well as a list of amended and additional conditions. There's an additional condition to deal with the parking management and allocation of spaces. Concerns were raised about the lead local flood authority having raised objections. We have now received further communication from them, and they are agreeing to 5 conditions to secure the outstanding drainage matters, plus an informative. So these are essentially the same as originally recommended by the LLFA, the previous application, with the wording as listed in the addendum sheet. The one exception is that bullet point 1 of the first condition is deleted. So those 5 conditions supersede conditions 19, 20 and 21 in the report. The lead local flood authority also required agreement with Thames Water, or evidence of agreement with Thames Water, to connect to their surface water sewer, and they were recommending the informative. We would recommend that condition 1 now includes this requirement, so there's a definite requirement to submit that information to us. So there is a formal wording that I'm recommending. I don't propose to read it out aloud, as long as officers can be given authority, delegated authority to add that to condition, the LLFA's condition 1. So the applicant has also agreed an additional section 106 headed term to clarify that the open space and play areas would be accessible by general members of the public. Moving on to the location plan. So the principle of residential development is acceptable in accordance with the allocation H2 of the site allocations DPT 2017 and the Two Waters Master Plan Guidance 2018. These identify the area for a comprehensive redevelopment of some 350 dwellings with a mix of flats and houses. The emerging local plan, however, allocates the site for around 480 dwellings, which carries some weight given the advanced stage of the local plan, the emerging local plan. We can move to the next slide. So this is the aerial view that shows the site context. London Road is to the north, beyond which is Boxmoor Trust land. Hardings Close and Whiteleaf industrial area to the south, with the West Coast Main Line Railway beyond this. Public open space to the south of the rail line is at Roughdown Common, which can be accessed via footpath 76 that crosses through the site via a footbridge over the railway. And we have an established older residential area to the west at Stratford Way, Roughdown Road and Catlin Street. Moving to the next slide. So I'm going to run through some photographs of the site. So there's 2 access points proposed from London Road. Copper Beach Copper Beach is to the left, bottom left photograph, just to the left of that. You can just see a branch in there. That is to be retained. On the next slide, these show the site's frontage to London Road, comprising a combination of self-sown and ruderal vegetation. On the next slide, this shows the view of the site between existing dwellings on London Road, 349, 351 London Road and Stratford Way, through between the dwellings. On the bottom left photograph, the line of trees you can see in the background are to be retained. On the next slide, these show a view of the site from Hardings Close, the south between Marlin Court and Hampside Court. The next slide shows the existing ribbon of 2-storey houses opposite the site on London Road, which provides some context in terms of materiality. The next slide shows the next 3 slides show the site in medium and long distance views. This is from Roughdown Common. The next slide is a view from Station Road and St John's Road. And the site on the next slide is as viewed from Boxmoor Common. Turning to the next slide, the site itself. Thank you. These are of the existing footpath 76 running through the site. You can see the palisade fencing there. The 2 top photos show the pressure reduction station, or PRS. And the access down the common, access to Roughdown Common involves negotiating 2 sections of footbridge. Moving to the next slide, this is the PRS from one of the bridge sections, and the PRS is to be retained because it is an essential piece of infrastructure that's still operational. The next slide is some views from the bridge section. and of the existing cleared site of concrete structures remaining. Moving to the next slide, this is the existing infrastructure amenities in the immediate context of the site. I'm not going to go through everything in there, but I'm sure you'll know that you'll realise that it is quite a sustainable site. On the next slide, this shows the proposed layout. And you should note that the physical constraints of the site, comprising the PRS and underground gas easements, dictate the general layout. So the gas easements are basically in a loop, following effectively the loop road, which dictates why that area as an easement has to be kept accessible. Moving on to the next slide. This is a rendering, an artist's rendering of the proposed development as viewed from the north, bird's eye kind of view. Key points to note are the 3.5-storey pitched roof fascia fronted development along London Road, with materials reflecting the surrounding vernacular, and to the rear of this 4 to 8-storey taller blocks. The next slide shows for information only, the previous scheme. Following slide shows the street hierarchy and connections. We can return to this if need be, if there's any questions. The next slide shows the car parking layout, 307 allocated unallocated spaces as previously mentioned, which accords with the SPD. There's 15 disabled spaces, which again is only marginally short by 0.35 of space. And we have also a car club space proposed, which would offset effectively 22 spaces. Moving to the next slide, this is the building footprint. In fact, this shows the reduction in footprint, which is about 5.5% on the previous scheme, and a consequential increase in open space. On the next slide, this demonstrates significantly reduced scale of buildings along London Road for blocks N1 and N4. In terms of appearance and detailing, a traditional pitched roof typology is proposed with inset and projecting balconies, together with a rusticated brick face detail. There are various variations to these materials and design features for the other blocks. I'm not going to go through them in detail, so we can skip the next 6 or 7 slides. You go down, keep going. Okay. So this actually shows the reduction in height of the southern blocks. These are the taller blocks, between 1 metre and 2 stories, as previously mentioned. So all of those southern blocks have seen a reduction in height. And the next slide, this is the a basic contemporary flat roof typology here, which is proposed for blocks S1 and S3 in this case, with projecting balconies and again rusticated brickwork panels. And again, there are various variations in materials for the other blocks, or we can return to if necessary. So we're going to skip through the next 7 or 8 slides. Keep going. Okay, leave it there. So this is the Holder Court community facilities, which they've managed to introduce because of the introduction of split levels as a result of their traditional construction. So this is a benefit to the scheme, providing some facilities that residents would have access to. The next slide is the proposed materials. You can move on, Robert. Proposed materials and detail for the Holder Court proposal, which takes its cue actually from the former gasometer on the site in terms of its metalwork and colouring. The next slide is the CGI showing the central communal open space, and to the left you can see where the communal facilities would be beyond the area which is a pond. And on that next slide is the open space and land use. Key feature here is there's a total of 46% of the site in open land use. And the next slide is the play strategy, which shows the basically identifies the children's play, the interactive areas and adult gym locations. The next slide is the layout of the Holder Park and garden area. And similarly, the next slide is for West Holder Park, local area of play. And the next slide is for the East Holder Park Leap, local equipped area of play. Obviously, details of these we are reserving by condition in terms of play equipment, fencing, etc. The next slide shows details of hard surfacing and street furniture. We can return to this if there are any questions. And the next slide is soft planting, which again we can return to if we want to. The ecology strategy is on the next slide. Similarly, we can return to that. And the drainage and SUDS layout is on this slide, which the lead local flood authority has asked for agreement of that by condition. So moving on to the following 7 or 8 slides, we've got the town and visual impact assessment views that have been provided by their consultants. So on each of these slides, we've got the existing, the previous, and now proposed scheme. So the first view is from London Road looking east. The next one is from Roughdown Common looking north. And this view, point 3, is from Bulbourne Moor on Boxmoor Trust Land looking south. And viewpoint 4 is from Hardings Moor on Boxmoor Trust Land looking southeast. And the next one is viewpoint 5 from Hardings Moor looking south. And viewpoint 6 from Station Road looking southeast. And the viewpoint 7 on the next slide is from Wroxham Avenue looking southwest. That's just one of the long distance views from the town itself. And the last view is from Hardings Close between Marlin and Amberside Courts, looking north towards the site. So we just drop down to the next slide. The recommendation is on pages 49 and 50 of the agenda, as amended by the addendum sheet and the further updates, as I've already mentioned, i.e. the 5 local flood authority conditions, the deletion of conditions 19, 20, 21, the addition of the flood authority's condition 1, addition to that condition that we are recommending in terms of the Thames Water connection, and the additional header term agreeing the open space to be publicly accessible. So basically, the tilted balance in this case applies as per paragraph 9.220 of the report. The question that is faced by members tonight is, does the adverse impacts of the development significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits? So the adverse impacts are shown on the left. The scheme does provide on-site play in the form of a leap now, which it didn't before. So that bottom adverse impact disappears effectively. There is some residual harm because they don't fully comply with the standard, but I would consider that the weight now drops from significant to moderate in terms of the harm. The harm to the character and appearance, which is the reason for refusal, is dealt with under this revised submission. As officers, we consider there is no material harm, but in any event, we consider there is less harm than before. And it's also the case that members have resolved on the 20th of March 2025 not to contest this at appeal, and that the reason for refusal is as such conceded. Therefore, effectively, that reason falls away. The outstanding matter is the lack of provision of 35% affordable housing. However, 8% affordable housing is offered, or 7.8%, and the weight to be attached to this harm is therefore substantial. Nevertheless, against this, there are significant benefits which are listed on the right, to which very substantial weight must be applied in terms of the provision of 485 dwellings, particularly given the housing shortfall that Decorum is faced with. Substantial weight to the 39 affordable homes, i.e. the 7.8% that are offered, and substantial weight to development of previously developed land or brownfield land. There are also those other benefits listed there. So these benefits, or rather the harm, either one harm of not providing enough affordable housing would, in officers' view, not be significantly and demonstrably outweighed, or would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the development. And on that basis, we recommend that officers' recommendation is followed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, members, that's quite a lot to digest, as well as all the reports that were published with it. Who wants to open the proceedings? Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask the case officer to clarify then just how many dwellings this site was allocated for in the draft local plan.
It was the figure, I believe, in the emerging local plan is 480 or circa 480. It's not a precise figure.
Right. So it's about ish what's being proposed here with the 485. And I'd also like to say the reduction in height is welcome, because I do remember how when the first application for this site came to the committee, it was refused on the grounds of height, amongst other things. So it's been reduced to 8 stories. Has it been reduced to 8 stories from 10 or from 11 stories?
From 10 before.
Thank you. That's my questioning for the moment, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Wanted to explore parking. There's 307 spaces for 485 residents, units rather, and probably double the number of adults within the development. Given that car ownership is rather more complex than simply living near a station, meaning you don't need a car, there's a widespread resident concern that there will be overspill of parking beyond the development itself, and yet the SIL provision does not allow for any revisiting of the controlled parking zone nearby and other streets in Boxmoor and Apsley. Is there any reason why we don't have any parking provision within the SIL allocation? Given that the experience of residents in the area with KD Towers development is that the reach of overspill of these developments far exceeds what you might expect.
I'm not quite following you in terms of we don't have any parking in the SIL list.
Well, sorry, section 106. I mean, yeah.
So the proposal is for 307 parking spaces.
Yes.
So I think your question was about controlled parking zones. Is that right?
Yes. Well, what I'm suggesting is the simple mathematics is that 307 parking spaces requires a third of the units to not use a car at all, and the other 2/3 to only have one car.
Okay.
I would suggest that that's really unrealistic levels and that there are likely to be far more cars than that, and there will be overspill into surrounding areas. And yet there's no provision within the report for putting in place mitigating measures for parking to protect the nearby neighbourhoods.
Yes, the report does include £50 per dwelling, totaling 24,250 for travel plan vouchers for use of the car club space. Now, there's evidence to show that that offsets parking by 22 spaces. The scheme does include a requirement for CPZ as part of the section 106, as part of the 278 provisions that Herts Highway request. That is picked up in the conditions. I'm just trying to find the condition number, but it's one of the highway conditions. Okay, so condition 28 is to include relocate CPZ traffic sign on eastern side of Roughdown Road out of path of pedestrian crossing and provide tactile paving. That's not.
That sounds like it's a couple of places that are being moved to accommodate the crossing.
Yeah, sorry, there is. It is picked up in the conditions because, so condition 29 says prior to the first occupation of the development, if I permitted traffic regulation orders, including the provision of W lines to the site frontage along London Road must be secured in place and implemented. So that prevents overspill onto London Road. And there are provisions for CPZ, for extending the CPZ, I believe, as part of the 278 process.
Sorry, can you point me towards that? Because I couldn't see anything within the document.
Can I help? There's a generic statement on page 6 on, I think it's item 16, traffic regulation order inter alia for CPZ, double yellow lines and any contribution to the highway authority.
That's right, yes.
Sorry, that's condition 6, did you say?
Oh, it is, sorry, I must admit, I missed that. It's when I referred to £50 voucher, it's below that. So it's item 16 in the heads of terms on page 50. So it says traffic regulation order inter alia for CPZ, double yellow lines and any contribution to the highway authority.
Page 50, you say?
So on page 6 of the
Page
officer's
6.
at the introduction, where we list the heads of terms, item 16 details the traffic regulation order outside of the site and the contribution to be paid by the developer towards that TRO. In addition, there is a condition, as Andrew, in terms of internally within the site to deal with parking management. But I think it's also very important for the members to note that parking was discussed at length in the previous scheme. Members ultimately accepted that the scheme met the council's parking standards and therefore didn't add parking as a reason for refusal for that application. As I understand it, this scheme has an improved parking ratio compared to the previous application. And therefore, although I do acknowledge members' concerns and the comments about the reality, from a policy perspective and in terms of the decisions members have already made, I certainly wouldn't recommend any further debate on parking, I'm afraid, due to those points.
Well, I accept there was very lengthy discussions about the parking within the development, but the objections by residents within this report shows that parking, overflow parking, is a significant concern. This TRO for the CPZ and the double yellow lines reads to me like it's the tinkering around the crossing at the bottom of Roughdown Road and the yellow lines on the road of London Road, and it doesn't suggest there's going to be anything significant to address overflow parking in Boxmoor and Apsley wider afield, which is an enormous concern, I would say, to residents.
I mean, I would warn against trying to refuse it on this because as Phil has just said, it wasn't a point that we felt that could be refused last time. The scheme does meet our parking standards, and it's also the case that there's 34 more parking spaces than on the previous application, and with all the other aspects in terms of a car club space and a high proportion of 56% of unallocated parking. This means that there's more efficient use of parking on the site. They're not locked up by someone not needing to park there, but still owning the space.
So is there no scope for conditions being reconsidered and tweaked to permit for some mitigating parking beyond the development? A lot of what you said is within the development, and this concern is about parking beyond the development.
So, yeah, my understanding is the CPZ and double yellow lines would relate to areas beyond the development.
It does, but in a very minimal way. London Road has very few houses on, double yellow lines on there. It's not going to have a very massive impact on the parking of residents in Stratford Way, Caitlin Street, even further afield, St John's Road, Boxmoor, into Apsley. If you have a flat in this development and you have 2 cars, you're likely to try and park it somewhere that might be a fair walk away, so that you've got parking for your additional car, and that could be to the detriment of residents further afield. And I think that's a really significant concern that doesn't seem to be addressed by this application. Thank you, Chair. I think I've had my say.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah.
Phil wants to say something on this.
Yeah, no, yeah, thank you, Councillor Allen. Just to, as Andrew's indicated, in terms of the TRO for the CPZ, that will be in the locality of the site. Obviously, the further a resident has to travel, park, the less likely they are to do so. And obviously, people will be aware of the situation when they purchase these properties. However, I do acknowledge the concerns being raised by members, and therefore it is potentially, well, it is possible for members to seek an additional head of term for a parking review to be part of the legal agreement, so that after a period of time, should this parking review indicate the problems that you're describing, it could lead to the implementation of an extended CPZ. So we could, we could ask for delegated powers to insert a additional heads of terms along those lines.
Thank you.
Right, we've got a number of people wanting to speak. We've got Councillor Guest, Councillor Wyatt Lowe, and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. Coming back to the height thing, I can see from the CGIs that show up on the screen that the height comes nowhere near that of the KD Tower. Have we got the figures for how the height of the tallest proposed buildings compared with tall buildings in the longer views like Symbio and the KD Tower?
I don't have those figures to hand, unfortunately. We can find the height of the blocks for this scheme. I'd need some time to check for that.
So Symbio House, which was granted an outline planning permission back in 2014, that was for the construction of a 16-storey tower. So obviously that outline permission was twice the height in storey terms to the current proposals before members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I inadvertently hit the wrong button and lost my place, so thanks for allowing me to speak. But you won't like what I'm going to say. I too am very concerned about the parking provision on this site. I think it's unreal expectations of the habits of people, even as we progress towards a society where there are less cars. And actually, I've sat on this committee now since 2003. And can we please stop making the same mistake regarding parking by inflicting misery on both existing residents and the newer residents who will be scrambling for places to park and parking miles away from their home and causing the overspill problems that Councillor William has so graphically described. I take on board Phil's point about the fact that we can have a look at heads of terms with regard to a parking review, but I have no faith in that, actually, in terms of its addressing the real concerns inherent in this site, which is basically overdevelopment. Now, I wasn't at the December meeting, so please forgive me if I am going over arguments that have already been had in this chamber. But I don't think there is any loss of benefit from reiterating those concerns, and if necessary, thinking about the planning provisions that we do have in decorum and whether they are adequately serving our residents. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, can I just quickly come back? So, previously, Berkeley Homes, this is anecdotal, so not necessarily, I'm saying you won't be necessarily rely on it, but Berkeley Homes have told me that they have witnessed a general fall in car ownership and usage across their portfolio of developments, with residents opting for alternative sustainable transport modes. They've also noted that the younger generations purchasing Berkeley delivered homes generally opt for alternative sustainable transport modes instead of cars, and noting that there's a high proportion of 1 and 2 bedroom properties, it's likely that the apartments will appeal more to those starting out in life buying a property than those having a family and wishing to have more cars. So it's just anecdotal, but that was the information that was given actually on the last application to me.
Next speaker is Councillor Mass.
Thank you, Chair. Now, when we considered this last time, I was one of the minority who reluctantly agreed that it ought to be approved. And overall, I don't think I've changed my mind, but I've got one or two concerns looking back at that page 6, where it's mentioned that there be various financial provisions for GP services, education, playing fields, and so on. Is that it's obviously important that all these services are local to the development. They're not the other end of Hemel Hempstead, for example. Then people who wouldn't necessarily need a car just to go shopping or go to the station or walk across to the centre of Hemel, they're more likely to need a car if their son's going to be playing football all the time up the Leverstock Green somewhere. So what I like to be assured of is that things like GP surgery, new primary school funds can be justified, and playing field provision will all be very local. Can we have that guarantee here?
So I think you're saying, are we sure that the contributions will be spent in the local area? The contributions, it's worth noting that the contributions to education are a new request, because previously they didn't, Arts County Council didn't request anything towards education. So this is actually a benefit in terms of offsetting the impacts of the development in terms of education and the needs of children to be educated. I understand that they will be being spent in the locality of Hemel Hempstead. The GP surgery, general medical services provision will be spent in one of the practices to expand one of the practices in Hemel Hempstead, I believe in the town centre, but they weren't specific about which practice it would go towards. They just mentioned about 4 different services. And the contributions to playing fields, so the additional LEAP contribution is at Blackbird Moor, which is on Boxmoor Trust land, about just over 400 metres from the site, and the contribution towards 77,000 odd for a neat mugger and other oversized play provision is to be, I believe, to be spent in Coronation Fields and other locations. So, so the upgrades at Coronation Fields and also to backfill requirements at the station gateway when that comes forward. Also playing contribution to adult and youth playing pitches for projects at Adeyfield and Chaldon Adventure Playgrounds for the upgrading of playing pitches. So they're relatively local. They're as local as we can get them. Unfortunately, DVC doesn't own any land in the locality of the development. So Boxmoor Trust will own a lot of the land that's available. Boxmoor Trust are not keen on introducing lots of playing pitches and things on their moorland. So those are the closest available opportunities.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Bronman.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions on the whole transport topic. We appreciate that the parking is defined, I think, in 2020 supplementary planning document, so that's not really, so that those actual numbers are not for discussion, but this system does have to be made to work. We can't end up with cars all over the place like we've seen in the new developments quite near here. So there needs to be some plan as to how these spaces are going to be effectively, how, the supply and demand will be able to match up. And I feel it should be a condition, really, of the planning that the developer comes up with some strategy in conjunction with the local authorities. It could be that they pay an annual season ticket for their parking spaces, such that the economic incentives are there to not own a car in that locality, and some of those funds raised could go to the public transport, to the buses and so on. There was mention, I think, in the previous plan, or the one relating to the station, there was talk about improved rail services. Could be an additional fifth platform or something. But I guess my main question here is that there needs to be much better active travel, cycling and walking, and that there is a connection and access to the site already onto Stratford Way. Will the Stratford Way entrance, for example, be accessible for cycling and walking? And is there a possibility that that could provide a quiet route to the station, a quiet and safe route, according to the LT 120 guidelines?
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, there is a significant package of proposals put forward and required by Hertfordshire Highways. So Hertfordshire Highways have looked at this in great detail, and have recommended most of the improvements from the scheme, including the shared cycleway that connects up with the existing cycleway on Station Road So you've got, as I also already mentioned, you've got the car club space. You've got cycle parking above the SPD standard. You've got a travel plan that's going to be required, which will include a variety of measures to try and increase use of sustainable transport modes. You've got a travel voucher scheme of £50 per home required in respect of encouraging the use of the car club space. You've got 2 pedestrian crossings that are being introduced across London Road. You've got a widened footway along London Road. You've got improvements to the public right-of-way through the site to Roughdown Common, making that more attractive. And you've got a car parking management plan, which will be secured by condition. You've got 50% active, 50% passive electric vehicle charging provision. The site is also within accessibility zone 1 and therefore highly sustainable in those terms. And as you've already noted, does meet the SPD standard. So there's a large number of things being proposed and being required by this scheme, but are dealing with the transport and traffic aspects of the scheme.
Yeah, I think the main tangible point of my question is, will there be active travel access to Stratford Way to provide that overall permeability for pedestrians and cyclists?
As part of the scheme, there is a proposed to be a footway through to Stratford Way from the site. Now, that it needs to be negotiated with the developer of Station Road as to how that can connect up without going along London Road. And that was always the intention, was to provide that alternative route to the station as part of that development. Berkeley Homes, unfortunately, hasn't taken that any further than proposing the access onto Stratford Way. So we'll need to be considering that as part of the redevelopment of Station Gateway for housing when that comes forward. And I believe there is a scheme being discussed at the moment for that, but I'm not involved in that.
Thank you. I have a further question about energy, but shall I let somebody else go first?
I don't see anybody else asking to speak, so go ahead.
Okay. So regarding the cost of living, energy security, and the climate emergency, which this council declared, on page 36, 9.151, it mentions mechanical ventilation with heat recovery and electric heating. Now, mechanical ventilation and heat recovery is great, but electric resistive heating, which I presume is what it means, is hardly the best practice. It can be claimed to be 100% efficient, but that's nowhere near the performance that we would get from heat pumps, which are 3 or 4 times more efficient. We've been using communal heating schemes in Decorum social housing at our recent developments, where you have hot water for heating and domestic hot water provided to the dwellings with an overall much better efficiency. So we've got the 2013 core strategy, CS28. Carbon emission reductions will be sought in the generation and use of energy, building design and construction. So are we really looking, is this really a reduction compared to what is considered reasonable practice today? Or will the developer be considering something a bit closer to best practice, which would be to use a communal heat pump which could then connect into wider district heating when the local areas develop the local area energy plans. I have a related issue about that on page 37, 9.152, the overheating strategy for the scheme primarily involves reducing solar gains through balcony shading and solar control glazing. I believe that the solar control glazing is not that great in its performance, but shading and using balconies is quite important, especially with single aspect south facing homes. So will there be, will a good proportion of those south facing windows have shading from balconies?
I unfortunately don't have the proportional number to give you a figure. All I understand is that that they have considered the solar gain issue in terms of their development, and that's what that's a summary of basically what they're proposing. So, I mean, going back to your question about electric radiators, and also whether they've considered other forms of renewables.
Are they planning to use high efficiency heating or just old-fashioned resistive heating, which was used historically in flats like this?
When you say resistive heating, I don't quite know what you mean, but do you mean radiators in the normal term?
Just, I think what they were suggesting is that they would be simple electric heaters similar to sort of fan heaters or storage heaters, rather than a modern efficient heating scheme, which would use less electricity, be lower cost for the people living there, which would use heat pumps, which would ideally be communal ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the information I do have to hand, but I understand that they are going for a very good system. It's a modern development and have to meet building regulations. And it is also the case, as I've set down there, that it would reduce carbon emissions associated with the regulated energy of the development by 74%. That's against Part L of the building regulations. And I've also noted that there would be an improvement on the previous scheme that achieved 69.4%, so 69.4% to 74% reduction in CO2 emissions, which is equivalent to a reduction of 241 tonnes of CO2 a year over the Part L requirement. So they're improving on building regulations requirement. I haven't gone into what mechanism they're using to improve on that, and I'm sure that they will have done everything they could to improve it with the best systems out there, rather than just using old school systems.
Okay, I hope they haven't finalised the designs and they can really try to optimise these things.
I mean, all we require is that they do show that they have considered being considered improving on Part L building regulations where possible, and then we leave it up to them to get the approval from building control.
Yeah. Councillor Bristow.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the tilted balance, could the officer just remind me how many years housing supply do we currently have in the borough?
Yes, its last estimate is 1.03 years left.
Crikey, last I checked it was 1.6, so that's gone down again. I think that really drives home the importance that when we apply the balance, we see that the scheme does supply a lot of housing, particularly small units for younger people and very proximate to public transport. I'm just referring again to the planning history of the site. It goes back to, I'm going to say 1993 here, with the erection of a gas kiosk. That was, I believe, when the site stopped functioning as a gasworks. So am I correct in saying it's sat essentially derelict for 32 years now?
I don't know whether it's 32 years, but it's certainly sat vacant for a very long time.
I think it's possibly longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Yeah, good to keep those things in mind, I think, when we make decisions. Thank you, Officer.
Thank you for that intervention, Councillor Bristow. Philip?
Yes, so I don't believe there's going to be any further questions. Chair, if I may just do a quick summary point.
Before you do that, could I just ask a question or make a point and see how this is being addressed? The site itself has got public access. How, and although it's likely to be one of these self-contained, subject to its own management, etc., what are we going to do about making sure that we have public right-of-way right across the site? We want to avoid it becoming, shall we say, a private estate.
Yeah, I mean, there is a public right-of-way, 76, that runs through the site from London Road to Roughdown Common.
Sorry, Andrew, I was thinking in terms of right across from east to west as well.
Oh, okay. Are you asking, is there a right of access for members of the public to go across the site? Yes, well, there would be, because we're going to make sure, and the applicants have agreed, that there'll be a section 106 head of term to confirm that they will, that the open space will be accessible by members of the public, not just by residents of this scheme. Does that answer your question?
Yep, it does. Thank you. Philip, over to you.
Thank you. So I just really wanted to recap a couple of points, because it's so I guess first of all, in terms of parking, ultimately members must make the decision in line with the local plan, and the parking standards SPD is part of the local plan which members have adopted. I acknowledge the concerns being raised, but that is adopted policy, and DMC is not the place to change policy. It's also really important for members to remember that the previous application was not refused on parking grounds. And indeed, this application has an improved parking ratio compared to a scheme that wasn't refused on parking grounds. The site is in a very sustainable location due to its proximity to the train station, and Andrew's described in depth the variety and depth of active travel measures that will be incorporated, and the improved connectivity that will result from this development, a key benefit of the scheme. I do note Councillor Bromland's points in respect of energy. However, this is the scheme before members. It is a scheme that shows significant improvements compared to current Part L. So whilst it may not be the ultimate best scheme, it is still a very good scheme in that regard. And ultimately, as Councillor Bristow mentioned in his comment, the council is in a dire situation in terms of housing land supply. And whilst members have outlined some concerns, adverse impacts, that has to, due to the tilted balance, members have to ask themselves, do they significantly and demonstrably outweigh the long list of benefits that would accrue from this development? So I'm certainly of the view that that in terms of a parking concern, if that were to be introduced at this stage, then I have no doubt that a planning inspector would conclude that that's wholly unreasonable behaviour in light of adopted planning policy and the previous decision-making of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. We've got Councillor Guest wanting to speak, and then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. And this scheme does address the height issue on which the previous one was refused. It will use brownfield land. It'll bring this site back into use. So optimise the use of this land that's currently vacant. And as has been said, council only has a 1.03 years of land supply. So with all those factors and applying the tilted balance, I'll move the officer recommendation to delegate with a view to approval. I see there is another speaker, so you might want to park that for the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Yes, Councillor Allen.
And it was just to clarify, accepting everything you said about parking and policy on the hoof, etc., that the headline condition about a parking review is still going to be recommended. Is that correct?
Philip.
Yes, so the recommendation would include that parking review mechanism, either as a condition or as a head of term in the legal agreement.
Thank you.
So with that as a qualification to it, Councillor Bristow.
I was going to second Councillor Guest's recommendation to delegate with a view to approval.
Thank you for that. Councillor Allen, with that as a proviso for a parking review, are you content that it be included? Good, thank you. So we've got a proposer to accept officer's recommendation. It's seconded by Councillor Bristow. Can I have a show of hands, please? 2, 3, 4, 6. 6 in favour. Those against? 2. So 6 in favour, 2 against. As it's an important one, I will vote in favour. Nope, I'm voting in favour. So that makes it 7. The recommendation is carried. Thank you, everyone. The next item is item 5B, 00323, variation of condition 2 of approved plans at Frithsden Vineyard. Sally Robbins is the officer to present. And we do have some speakers registered to speak. Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So before I commence with the presentation, I just wanted to make members aware that we've received a late item with concerns relating to the 2 front gable ends of the dwelling. So these were originally proposed to be fully glazed. However, we asked the applicant during the application stage of the original scheme to omit the glazing within the gable ends. The plans were amended to fill in the gables, and those were the plans put before members previously. So at appeal stage, we suggested that permitted development rights be removed by condition, and this would have prevented any new windows, etc., being installed. However, the inspector did not think it reasonable or necessary and made the point that as the site lies within the national landscape, There are already restrictions in place in terms of permitted development rights. However, we believe that focusing in on that specific issue of the potential for the glazed gable ends, it is reasonable to impose a condition that specifically prevents this. So we're recommending that we add a condition in addition to those listed in the report that will say something along the lines of, no glazing shall be installed within the front gable ends of the dwelling hereby approved without permission from the local planning authority. So if we go on to the first slide, please. So the application site is located at Frithsden Vineyard. The application has been referred to committee due to the contrary view of the parish council. Next slide, please. So the site comprises a detached dwelling, which is located to the west of the wider vineyard site. Next slide. So planning permission was granted via an allowed appeal for a replacement dwelling. The current application seeks an amendment to the approved scheme. The amendments relate to an increase in the external terrace area and the addition of underground basement rooms. There are no changes proposed to the built form or physical appearance of the dwelling above ground. So the plan before you here shows the approved scheme. So if you go on to the next slide, that shows the proposed site plan so you can see where the terrace area has been filled in. Otherwise, there are no changes. So you go on to the next slide. So the layout of the roof and first floor plan, which are the two top plans, remain the same other than the increase in terrace area. At ground floor level, there would be the addition of a master bathroom suite, a games room and a media room. These would be situated to the rear of the dwelling, so they'd be set into the hillside and not visible above ground. At lower ground floor level, which is the plan at the bottom, there'd be the addition of a wine cellar, a plant room, storeroom, and a lower hall. Next slide. So the proposed elevations, there would be no changes to the built form above ground. The east elevation, there would be an additional room below and to the right of the garage. And then this section shows that there would be additional rooms below and to the left of the hall. If we just stay on this one for the moment, the bottom front elevation, you can see the gable ends that I was talking to at the beginning of the presentation. So those, the top triangle gable ends were glazed in the original one, but now they're infilled and we want to retain that. So go on to the next slide. So there would be no change to the north elevation, so that's the rear elevation, and no change to the west elevation above ground, and the outline of the basement is shown underneath the building. So if we go on to the next slide, this is just a street view looking north up Roman Road. So the application site entrance is shown by the arrow. Next slide. So this shows the entrance to the vineyard. Next slide. And this is just a view of the front of the existing dwelling. Next slide. And then a view of the rear of the existing dwelling. And a view looking towards the southwest of the rear. Next. And then these are just some views of the driveway, so you can see the existing winery building in the background there. So next slide. This photo was provided by the applicant, and it shows the existing view from eye level on the sloping garden adjacent to the dwelling. So that's where the terrace is proposed. Next slide. So this is a photo from the neighbouring property, Shepherd's Cottage, which is to the south of the site. This is looking towards the application site. Next slide. So the approved is on the left and the proposed is on the right. So you can see on the right-hand side, on the top plan, you can see the increase in terrace area. On the middle plan, on the right-hand side, you can see those 3 additional rooms at the back, highlighted in green. And then the bottom plan on the right-hand side, that's the new basement rooms. Next slide. So just another comparison of the approved versus the proposed. So the approved is on the left, and on the right-hand side, you've got the proposed scheme. So the new rooms are indicated by the green dashed lines underneath the dwelling. Next slide. And this is just the final comparison of the approved versus proposed drawings. So it shows that there are no changes above ground. The purple shows the visible elements, and the green shows the below ground elements. So the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined in the report and the additional conditions as said at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Right, we have a number of speakers. In fact, this has attracted 5 speakers tonight. And the first one on the list is Alison McDougall, speaking in objection. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chairman and Councillors. I speak as Chair of the Nettleton, Frithsden and District Society. We hope you've been able to read our letter and the addendum to the papers for this meeting, which contains a detailed response to the officer's report, and we urge you to refer to it this evening before making your decision. The local authority has an active duty to seek to further the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the AONB, which includes the impact on landform and geology. We say this statutory duty is not met because the scale and consequences of the significant amount of earth digging, concrete pouring, plus extended areas of hard surfacing on the large terrace will cause significant harm to the AONB, not to mention the problem of increased surface water runoff into the high flood risk area directly below, mentioned in our report. The planning officer in the pre-application advice expressed the very same concerns and concluded that the extent of these works cumulatively may result in significant harm to the natural character and appearance of the landscape in this locality. We'd like members to ask themselves, where is the public benefit in this application which would outweigh the significant harm recognised in the pre-application advice and acknowledged in the officer's report? In our view, there is none. The applicant already has permission for a large replacement dwelling of a considerably larger magnitude than what exists today. There is significant harm to the AONB from this proposal which cannot be justified on the grounds of public benefit. The Society agrees with the residents of Frithsden who cannot fathom how quadrupling the size of the existing building can be acceptable and without any conditions attached to protect the village from further development of the site in such a sensitive location. If this were standard planning application, the Society as a very minimum would be asking for legally enforceable conditions which would include, firstly, a comprehensive construction management plan to protect the business of the Alford Arms pub, the 2 horse livery yards in the village, and vulnerable road users, particularly the many cyclists and horse riders who use Frithsden Lane and Roman Road every day. The single track lanes are too narrow to allow vulnerable road users to get far enough away from massive construction lorries, and is a serious accident waiting to happen. Secondly, restricting use of the dwelling solely to domestic use and for no business purposes. This is vital given the house is part of a confirmed master plan for the site to be used for wine tourism and holiday lets, activities which have not yet had planning permission. And thirdly, to remove all permitted development rights to ensure any further enlargement of the house, outbuildings, swimming pools and other structures requires planning permission in order to protect this sensitive site from even more development. The problem is imposing conditions as part of a Section 73 application. And in order to protect residents' legitimate concerns, this application has to be refused and made to go through a full planning application process with a proper flood risk assessment to the properties below. We urge you to refuse the application. Time's up,
I'm afraid. Thank you. Speakers 2 and 3 are Becky Salisbury and Jeremy Barnett, and you have 5 minutes between you.
In June 2023, you rightly concluded that the original replacement dwelling at Frithsden Vineyard was too large, out of scale with the children's landscape, and inappropriate for the edge of a conservation area. You likened it to a Colorado ranch house, overbearing with multiple balconies and a large terrace that directly overlooked our Grade 2 listed home, Shepherd's Cottage. Yet despite your strong objections, the inspector granted approval, and now, unbelievably, the applicant wants even more, an 8,000 square foot, 4-story building that includes a wine cellar, plant room, a loft playroom, and an expanded terrace for entertaining. This is no longer just a family home. The appellant has recently confirmed that the original master plan remains the intention, and his stated true requirement for a house of suitable scale and prestige to act as a centerpiece for hosting wine collectors and buyers with the planned wine tourism business is a clear admission of the unlawful commercial use of the domestic property. Let me highlight 3 key objections. This proposal will quadruple the size of the original house, far beyond what is reasonable. The enlarged terrace, elevated 5 meters above our gardens, will increase noise and significantly worsen the overlooking and loss of privacy. This valley setting only amplifies those effects. This past winter showed how vulnerable the area is, with runoff from the vineyard flooding nearby Clayton Cottage. Digging out and concreting a vast basement on sloped land will exacerbate this, directly contradicting national planning guidance on flood risk. And thirdly, no management plan has been required. We estimate over 300 lorries will be needed to remove soil alone, effectively blocking the narrow Roman road for years. This isn't a minor inconvenience, it's a daily denial of access for residents, potentially lasting 2 to 3 years. Councillors, you were right to refuse the original proposal. This version is even more excessive. I respectfully urge you to reject it again to protect the children's national landscape, our heritage assets, and the rights of neighbouring residents. Thank you.
Hi, I speak as co-owner of the Orford Arms in Frithsden, where my husband David and I have run the pub for 26 years. From our customers' consistent feedback over time, it is crystal clear that one of the main draws to Frithsden is its rare untouched quality, which is like hens. We have accommodated them as much as possible with our deliveries, refuse collection and customer parking. We are not against change, but understand more than most that the fallout from the logistics in respect to the vastly increased scale of lorries to and from the site from this application. Frithsden is a popular walking spot, so there is a constant stream of folk to be found walking around the green and along the lanes. There are no pavements. The risk to these vulnerable road users, as well as local riders from potentially hundreds of extra large earth-moving lorries, is very real. The Alford's outside dining area lies next to the green and is on a narrow road junction with cars usually parked opposite. Lorries would not be able to negotiate this junction, especially as parking for walkers and pub goers extends along the lane. The sheer scale of excavation results in increase in vehicle movements will impact the rural village setting and has the potential to create mayhem with large lorries unable to get in or out. The Orford Arms has been the core of our community for centuries, but as with most rural pubs, the margins are tiny and one bad summer could mean make or break for us. All we're trying to do is protect our vulnerable trade against a summer of earth-moving vehicles with noise, fumes, people being asked to move their cars, and the fracas this will cause. We employ 39 local people, and even one job lost would be a tragedy. We welcome the applicant's recent offer of limiting lorry movements to before 11 a.m. And if the committee are minded to support this application, would ask that this condition is imposed. However, to echo Alison's earlier comments, we do have serious concerns on how enforceable this would be. The fallout from good gestures not being followed through, or errant drivers taking it upon themselves to decide routes and delivery times, is too enormous to contemplate. Building the approved house is already enough to cause substantial harm, but another 2,000 square foot or plus of excavation could quite literally mean the end of our fragile business. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent timing. And the next speaker is Councillor Weston-Holt-Smith.
Good evening. I represent the Parish Council and we ask you to refuse this application for 3 overriding reasons. Firstly, it is legally beyond the powers of a Section 73 application, which can only be used to tweak conditions provided the build still matches the operative part of the original consent. This application has added 3 linked basements, a bigger footprint, and a massive terrace, an enlargement of over 40%. That, we say, is a materially different building and therefore not suitable for a Section 73 application. Secondly, the scale of the additional enlargement conflicts with decorum planning policy. The existing house is 2,400 square feet. The replacement house approved on appeal is 5,700. The house in the proposal before you is 8,060. That is a 226% jump from the original and a 41% increase on the scheme approved at appeal. Decorum policy allows only limited enlargement in the rural area and says replacement dwellings must not be materially larger than what they replace. We say that a 40% jump is not limited and that 230% is definitely materially larger. Finally, as this is a Section 73 shortcut, let's think about what has not been assessed. First, there is no traffic or highways plan. Basements mean bulk excavation and tons of concrete. Translation, hundreds of HGVs on a single track lane deemed unsuitable for HGVs. This brings high risk of damaging listed flint walls, blocking the road, and endangering pedestrians. Approving such intensity of construction with no traffic management plan flatly conflicts with CS8 on highway safety. Second, there is no carbon assessment. Basements mean a lot of concrete, which in turn means a lot of embodied carbon. Even using cautious figures, we estimate the extra carbon from this plan is equivalent to driving a family car around the world 7 times. Yet the application has no whole life carbon or energy statement breaching CS29 and draft policy CC1. Third, there is no flood risk report, yet the basements replace absorbent chalk, compact the ground above, and add even more hard surfaces on the steep slope prone to flooding. This increases fast, hard runoff towards cottages marked high risk on the surface water flood map, exactly what CS31 seeks to prevent. All these unresolved issues underline one thing. This is far too significant a change to sneak through as a minor variation. Without the full suite of plans and assessments that accompany a fresh application, councillors simply cannot judge whether it meets the national, local, or emerging policies. Approving it under Section 73 would be taking a decision in the dark.
Excellent time. Thank you. And we'll now have Duncan Thompson speaking in support.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here not just as the applicant, but as someone committed to making Frithsden our family's long-term home. We understand how sensitive and cherished the landscape is, and we believe this proposal reflects a thoughtful, respectful approach to integrating within it. This is a modest variation to the replacement dwelling approved on appeal last year. It includes a few subterranean rooms with no external visibility and a 25 square metre extension to the terrace. These changes simply give our growing family more flexibility. Our second child was born last month and we're planning for long-term family life. This isn't about luxury or commercial use. It's about making the most of a home that has already been through rigorous planning scrutiny. We fully understand and respect the concerns raised by residents, and I want to speak directly to those now. Firstly, on the use of Section 73, as confirmed in the officer's report and recent Court of Appeal rulings, it's entirely lawful where the development description remains the same, as it does here, as a replacement dwelling. Secondly, scale. I understand why some feel the house is large, but planning doesn't assess floor area in isolation. What matters is the visual and landscape impact, and older percentage-based policies now carry less weight. Both officers and the planning inspector concluded the scheme would not harm the character of the national landscape, the setting of the conservation area, or the registered park and garden. The inspector wrote, due to the specific characteristics of the appeal site, I see no reason why the increased height, area, and materials are harmful. On traffic, we understand construction causes short-term disruption, but highways officers confirmed no need for a management plan, and a condition ensures proper removal of excavated material. Drainage and flood risks were also raised. In response, the officer confirmed the site lies in flood zone 1 with no concerns raised from statutory consultees. Lastly, I want to be clear. This will be our full-time private residence. It's not a business or an events venue. The changes won't increase the house's height, visible bulk, or alter its materials. Everything remains within the approved scheme. The proposal doesn't alter the principle of development. It builds carefully on what's already approved. It complies with policy, protects the landscape, and gives our family a sustainable home we can grow into for future generations. We respectfully ask you to support the officer's clear recommendation and approve this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Excellent timing. Right, members, over to you. Councillor Allen, I think, first.
I don't believe it's significant, but I'd like to declare that I'm a good friend of one of the neighbouring landowners. I've had no discussion with the landowner and have no preconceived thoughts on this development.
Thank you. I don't see anybody clamouring to speak. Who's first?
I am familiar with the lane through my friendship, as previously noted. And I have found it hard enough reversing a family car in that lane. It's got banks on either side. And so I do I'm very much struck by the concerns raised about the lorries and traffic and absence of a traffic management plan. I wonder if officers could comment on that.
Yep, so the Highway Authority were consulted, as you know, and they didn't raise any concerns. So I do appreciate what you're saying about it being a narrow lane. But yeah, the Highways Authority didn't think it was necessary to have a construction management plan. Okay, but if members consider it necessary, we could add construction management plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, coming back to the lane issue, must be, I was sitting here thinking about it, must be 15 years ago. I had lunch at the Orford Arms. It was an excellent location because no mobile phone signals. So when you take a client home, there's no interruptions, it was in those days. But when I left the Orford Arms and walked up the road, I was rather was surprised and annoyed to find that a Haygates lorry had gone past and basically ripped its side down the side of my car to the point where I could actually open the boot by putting my hand through the side panel. So I think the comments and the concerns about construction traffic in the lane are extremely valid. I mean, I speak from first-hand experience, and I think if the decision is decided to go ahead with it, there should be some sort of traffic management put in place here because the driver of the lorry very kindly left a note saying, "I think I hit your car," which I thought was a bit of an understatement at the time. But could have driven off and never happened, never seen it. But it is extremely tight, and I think it could cause a problem. Thank you.
Before I take Councillor Guest, Becky, could you just press the button and turn your light off there? The speaker, that's it, thank you. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand what members are saying about the narrowness of the lane and the problems that could cause with construction traffic. Is it normal to have a construction management plan for the development of one house?
No, you are correct, Councillor Guest. It would be unusual to impose a construction management plan for the development of one house. However, if members felt that due to the specific road conditions of the locality of the site, and also bearing in mind the increasing floor space and the nature of the construction surrounding the basement, then should members consider in that context that the construction management plan is necessary, then officers are happy to add it.
Thank you for explaining that a construction management plan is not a no-no for the construction of one house.
Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I just wanted to know a bit more about the officers' views on this section 73 comments that have been made by both parties on this discussion, and the extent to which we should be mindful of the parish council's position that this is an irregular route for a considerable increase in the floor plan of the building.
Yeah, so the background to it is that there have been a few court judgments dating back from 2019. So I think there have been 4 in total. The most recent one was from December last year. Generally, they were fairly consistent in that they said that you can't use section 73 to amend the description of development. One of the court cases brought in this idea of a second limitation that said you can't use section 73 to create fundamental changes. So that's where, you know, in development management, we were having to kind of make a judgment on what was fundamental. Another thing that kind of muddied the water a bit was that in the PPG, in the planning practice guidance, it used the word minor when it referred to section 73 amendments. So it used the words minor material amendment. So the most recent court decision from December last year clarified that minor is something that's not set out in statute. It's not a word that should be used. And that there's no limit to the scope of the changes that can be made under section 73, providing they're not inconsistent with the description of development. So the operational development is the description. And there's no second restriction that, as suggested by one of the High Court decisions. So that means that even substantial or fundamental changes can be made to a development under section 73. So it just means that section 73 remains a very flexible tool that can be used to make substantial changes to a planning permission.
And I'm concerned about the flooding runoff risk. As has been said, this is a chalk hill, which is naturally, permeable to rainwater, and blocking that could well have an impact. Is it true to say that if it goes through the section 73 route, that there isn't a proper scrutiny of the flooding and runoff implications of the development?
No, that's not correct. It's still subject to the same level of scrutiny as it would be if it were a full planning application that was submitted as an amended scheme. So we still consult the same statutory consultees as we would have done for a full application.
Next, we have Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I remember we refused this, whenever it was, some time ago, and we've had the appeal now, and I don't think there's any point in addressing the same points again. Also take into account the fact that the building, and I accept it quite entitled to use section 73 to make these changes, will not be significantly exposed above ground. A lot of it's below ground and nobody's going to see it. So apart from, I also share concerns about the construction aspect. This is a very distinctive location with a narrow lane leading to a very busy pub restaurant. Very popular, I've been there. And if a lot of construction traffic comes down there, I think it would be essential, notwithstanding it's just one house that's going to be built, to have a proper scheme. And I think be very grateful if planners could go back to County Council and see if they can get some agreement. I think it's a special case. It's not just one house in a sort of infill in Hemel Hempstead. It's a much more difficult location for construction traffic. But apart from that, I'm happy to propose accepting the, subject to what I've just said, propose accepting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll park your proposal first. Councillor Riddick, did you want to say something? No. Anybody else wish to say anything? Right. So we've got a recommendation to accept officer's recommendation from Councillor Patterson. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second officer's recommendation for approval.
Before we move to a vote, Philip.
I'm just conscious that pre-commencement conditions, and should these be a pre-commencement condition, we do require developer permission. So can we just confirm that the applicant is happy with the construction management plan? Thank you.
So with the addition of a new condition, construction management plan,
just to double check, that included the condition of no trucks beyond 11 a.m.
That was a proposal, I believe, during the course of the objectors' comments, that construction traffic was going to be no later than 11 a.m. in the morning. I think that was the proposal there. Do we incorporate that into a condition?
I'm not sure that that would meet the test of reasonableness in terms of in terms of the typical hours of construction. Limiting it to 11 a.m. Would significantly prolong the build, and therefore that the impact of the build would be far greater in terms of the duration of the build. I'm not sure that would necessarily be reasonable in terms of the normal application of a construction management plan.
I think I understand your limitation there. Councillor Allen wants to say something on this.
Well, I was just going to say that it might be in the developer's interest, given that if the lane is going to be clogged up with parking from the pub, then there might be considerable trouble getting lorries in there after 11 a.m. anyway.
You have a point. I think we're looking at the principle here.
Well, I've never known a condition where we specify a construction management plan that limits construction to finish at 11 a.m.
Councillor.
Sorry, Phil, it was construction traffic, and I was led by the speaker to believe that the applicant was sort of amenable to the proposal, but perhaps I've been misled.
Yeah, so we could expand because the applicant has agreed in respect to the excavation aspect, that the lorries associated with that must be prior to 11 a.m.
Thank you, that was what I was referring to.
Right, that will go in the minute with the condition. Right, can we have a show of hands? Those to support the officer's recommendation, please show your hands. Officer's recommendation is carried. And one abstention. Shall we adjourn for 5 minutes and let the visitors leave? Shall we have a break now? Yes? A 10-minute break? Okay. And can I just also say that item 5C is a Berkhamsted application, and so is 5F. I will vacate the chair and let Councillor Guest take both applications.
But is everyone sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. So the next application is item 5C, for which the case officer is Robert Freeman. So over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for development at the rear of 354 High Street, Berkhamsted, and it's for the construction of 3 new dwellings, associated car parking and landscaping. Just before we get into the slides, I'll draw members' attention to the addendum report, and in particular to note that the application has been subject to a draft appropriate assessment. That appropriate assessment has identified harm to the children's beechwoods. It has also identified mitigation in the form of children's beechwoods, salmon sang payments, and we therefore need to delegate this also with a view to completing that appropriate assessment to secure those measures, in addition to the recommendation, which is obviously to delegate with a view to approval, subject to the completion of a legal agreement securing salmon sang. So the first slide before you demonstrates the application site in terms of its location as outlined in red on the left-hand side. The application site is relatively close to the town centre of Berkhamsted. That is just beyond the conservation area boundary, which is on Park Street to the east of the site. On the aerial photo, you can obviously see car parks associated with the M&S store and wider beyond that public car park and effectively Waitrose further to the east. So this is the existing site plan at the moment. You've got a existing commercial unit at ground floor level with a residential unit above it at number 354. There are a number of outbuildings within the grounds of that building, and to the side of that you've got the existing car garage and outbuildings associated with those running the full length of the eastern boundary and down to Park Street. So this is on the left-hand side, the view from the high street looking at the application site. So say you've got the car garage on the corner, you've got the entrance gates to the application site on the right-hand side, and the main building at 354, effectively directly opposite that crossing. Moving into the application site, you've got the view of the garden to number 354A and looking towards Colmer on Park Street. So you've got that outbuilding there at the rear of that garden, and you've got on the right-hand side the workshops on Park Street and the rear of those buildings on the common boundary there. This is a view taken from the effectively the hard standing at the rear of number 354, looking back towards the high street. As you can see on the far left-hand side, you've got the National Tyre and Exhaust Centre on the corner of Park Street. You've got number 354 directly in the middle there. The garden to the open door and development at the rear of number 362, which is an old flat 1 and 2 old school house. Moving on, so the proposed layout provides a gated access to the site. It provides 3 parking spaces for a staggered terrace of 3 dwellings, 3 two-bedroom properties with adequate space for manoeuvring within that location. Garden depths of between 10.5 and 12.5 metres. And this shows the ground floor plans to those units and the proposed first floor plans. The dwellings themselves will be a contemporary style. Those are the units there showing the front elevation of the proposed terrace and the rear elevation of those units. Those are the long sections across the site. So you can see in dotted lines on there, the existing kind of outbuildings effectively to Park Street on the lower elevation, southeast long shirt. And you can see the fence line marked and dotted on the proposed northwest elevation with Colmar drawn on the left-hand side of your screen there. There is a slight slope as you go down towards the gardens, effectively a 1.5 metre drop between the properties. So these are the indicative views of the proposals from Park Street as supplied by the applicants. So you've got a chamfered zinc clad roof with a pitch going beyond that and a flat roof section within the middle terraced unit. Say the cladding is a better quality than effectively what you've got on the roofing materials to those outbuildings. So the proposals, you've got a computer generated image of the application site on the left hand side. An example from Cosen's Lane in London where the applicants have used a similar sort of style of property. So that puts a bit more real life in terms of what's being proposed. So just in conclusions on this scheme, the council does not have an adequate supply of housing under the MPPF and must determine the application in accordance with paragraph 11. It's clear to us that the adverse impacts of development will not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits associated with proposals under the MPF, principally in terms of making use of a land in a sustainable location, making an efficient use of land, securing well-designed places and affordable housing. Mitigation measures identified in the draft appropriate assessments are needed to ensure the integrity of the Children's Beechwood SAC. The authority is obviously delegated to complete that appropriate assessment, and the application is delegated with a view to approval to securing a legal agreement with the mitigation of the SAM and the SAC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Now, the first speaker on this, speaking in objection to the application, is Councillor Garrick Stevens. Councillor Stevens, speaking as a town councillor, you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair and members. This application for 3 dwellings at the rear of the Kite Shop on the High Street by its terraced layout across the full width of the site is an overdevelopment of the site, and we request that the application is refused. I'm asking you to regard this as a reminder of what used to pass as a sound principle for accessing the rear of properties. A terraced layout is widely used to maximize the frontage to a site, but invariably there is a passageway between buildings to access the rear, or there's a convenient rear roadway access, such as at Shublands Avenue or Boxted Road, where there's a back-to-back arrangement with an access down the centre. In recent years, increasingly, we are seeing applications that are full width, losing even the 1 metre gaps at their side boundaries. The borough has a policy in Appendix 3 to safeguard access to the rear, while the county introduced a similar policy to enable cycles to be stored to the rear of the property. This application shows cycle storage to the rear, but access is only through each dwelling, and that's referenced in paragraph 823. If we are serious about the LC width agenda, we should not be placing obstacles to residents accessing bikes that are stored at the rear. Now, assuming windows to the rear will be cleaned, grass to be mown, all the kit, cuttings and debris will need to be taken through the dwelling. Given where we are on housing numbers, I acknowledged another 3 would be welcome. But this flawed scheme will provide poor amenity to its residents and fails to comply with the borough's policy on safeguarding access to the rear. Please refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens, and thank you for keeping well within time. The next speaker is Julia Riddle, who's speaking in support of the application. So Councillor Stevens, if you'd like to vacate the hot seat, please. And Ms Riddle, if you'd like to take the hot seat, the public participation seat, please. Since those microphones are active, there's no need to play musical chairs. To activate the microphone, by pressing the silver button on the base unit. You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. The planning application before you proposes the development of 3 two-bed, 4-person dwellings on backland off the High Street in Berkhamsted. The properties proposed would be ideal for either starter homes or downsizing properties, making a valuable contribution to local housing need. The proposed development makes best use of a redundant brownfield site, which comprises hard standing and exhibits no ecological or biodiversity value. The applicant accepts the required SAM and SANG requirements as set out. The surrounding area includes a mix of residential and commercial uses. The property at 354 High Street, as identified, is in use as a residential flat at first floor level and comprises an office and small...
Sorry to rudely interrupt, but the clock isn't running.
From now, thank you. Small showroom on the ground floor level operated by a fitted furniture company. The adjacent site on Park Street to the east is in commercial use as a vehicle repair centre. The site is sustainably located within the built-up area of Berkhamsted, within walking distance of the town centre and mainline train station. The site lies on the edge but outside of the Berkhamsted conservation area. Specific consideration has been given to the design of the proposed development in terms of views, scale and materials in this context. The topography of this site slopes downwards from the High Street, meaning that the site and the built element as proposed is of limited visibility from outside of the site. 3 units are proposed in an attractive and high quality scheme, which delivers private and communal amenity space, cycle parking provision, bin storage within a secure gated environment in a density which reflects the town centre location. The design of the scheme has evolved from pre-application discussions with the council, reducing the scale and height to ensure a development which is appropriate in this backland environment without impact to the surrounding residential and commercial uses or the conservation area. The chamfered shape of the roof line reduces bulk and massing and allows more sunlight and daylight into adjoining gardens than would be achieved with a traditional pitched roof or flat roof. The roof projection provides screening to the sides of the development, and concealed gutters will have leaf guards and can be cleaned out using gutter vacuums so that side access is not necessary. The frontage has been staggered in its design to ensure that the privacy of adjoining properties is maintained. The properties will all have private amenity space in the form of rear gardens, which can be sensitively planted, and south-facing patio spaces at the front. The gardens are large enough for storage of small implements for the maintenance of a garden of that scale. There will also be shared amenity in a front courtyard, which has dedicated spaces for car parking, refuse, and recycling. The proposed materials and design are of the highest quality, including the use of a yellow stock brick, which has a rich depth of tone, and black framed aluminium windows, creating a clean edge and subtle modern accent to the elevations. The sustainability of the location and appropriate level of car parking has been justified through the transport statement which accompanies this application. In summary, we would urge your support of this carefully considered application, which makes a high quality provision of valuable residential accommodation on a brownfield location in the town centre of Berkhamsted, meeting technical requirements and in accordance with planning policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to you, and thank you for keeping to time. Now it's over to the committee for questions and comments. Questions and comments, anyone? Yes, Councillor Riddick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm very concerned about this particular application. I regard it as inappropriate, contrived over development. Now, I took the trouble to see all the documents which have been posted on our planning portal. And one of the very important ones is this one, pre-application advice, which has been just referred to by the architect. Now, this document was 18 pages of comprehensive advice to the applicant. And the conclusion was, the proposals are not acceptable in their current format and would be unlikely to secure planning permission for for the reasons identified above. Now, I find it difficult to understand why we're sat here listening to this particular application when the applicant has gone completely against the advice which they were given. Some of the issues have already been referred to by Councillor Garrick, which I was going to refer to anyway. About the rear gardens, completely enclosed, no direct access at all. Everything has to come right the way through the houses, whether it's the bicycles, the grass cuttings, all the gardening materials, is just not practical at all. The refuse storage area is too far away from the road for collection. Each of these properties has 3 wheelie bins, blue, grey, green. So that's 9 wheelie bins there. They are positioned far too away for our refuse team to collect from the high street. Parking. Parking is totally inadequate. The standards are for 2-bedroom properties, 1.5 parking spaces. We've got 3 2-bedroom properties there. We need a minimum of 4. Can't have a half, I accept that. You need a minimum of 4. And all we've got is 3. And no visitor parking whatsoever. So I'm afraid this is an application which I'm not prepared to support because it just does not make sense. And to go in the face of good advice which was given by our planning officers, I think this is really something we should take on board. So I'm afraid I'm going to recommend refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riddick. We'll have to vote on the application for the office of the motion for the office of recommendation first. So are there any further questions and comments? Right. If there are no further questions, that's Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Stevens said that it was against policy to not have a side entrance and terraced houses to the back. But is that where is that in policy nowadays? And does it is it just a common practice rather than policy? Can you tell me?
The spacing around properties for access and maintenance is a saved policy under Appendix 3 of the local plan. In consideration of obviously the merits of the proposals before you, one must conclude that obviously whilst that is a desirable element of planning policy, it is an old planning policy and has very limited weight in terms of current day planning applications. It is more pertinent if you've got semi-detached, detached characters to residential properties as well within the surrounding area, because obviously you're looking at to develop something that's in accordance with the surrounding and prevailing character of the area. This location is quite mixed, as you would have seen from the aerial photographs. You do have a number of terraced properties. You have flats above commercial units. And the case has been made, obviously, during the determination of the application, that there is no need for rear access in these to these properties. I will accept that Councillor Stevens has identified that bike storage at the rear of the properties, some people might not consider that to be particularly desirable in terms of traipsing your bike through the house. Others might see it as a more secure way of storing your bike and be fine with that approach. Bins, you'd normally quite often have them at the rear of the property. You wouldn't in this instance. You don't need to access the rear of the properties for bin storage. Maintenance of the side elevations, the agent touched on neatly how that would be maintained and kept free from obstruction. The issue then arises to members to consider that even if they consider that to be harmful, whether that is sufficient harm to just outweigh any benefits arising from the development. I've made it pretty clear in our view that obviously there is limited harm, if any, at all, as a result of the scheme, and it is clearly outweighed by the benefits of new housing in a sustainable location.
That's right, and it's a brownfield site, isn't it, as well? Even though I think they're building the houses in a different location to where the workshops were. Is that right?
Yes, they are building the houses on the existing area of hard standing, yes, removing workshops from that site.
Yeah. I mean, in a very limited way, it's similar to the gasworks site, but that was brownfield site. And some might say there wasn't enough car parking or it wasn't the right size. So I'm very reluctant to refuse this one, I think. I think it's a reasonable, if not perfect, certainly not perfect, infilling. And I appreciate we're desperately short of housing supply. So I want to hear what other people say before I actually propose accepting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Are there any further questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Bristow.
Thank you, Chair, yes. We, of course, always have to look at material planning considerations, and one of those is layout and density of the buildings. What sort of weight would you give the challenges that have been expressed by the other councillors and Councillor Stevens with regard to this development?
Sorry, what? So I think in terms of the issues raised by Councillor Stevens, obviously in terms of the lack of an access to the properties, I'd have to consider that, very limited weight indeed in terms of identified harm. It's certainly not out of character to have terraced units there. In response to claims of overdevelopment, obviously you've got good quality internal amenity space on these units. You've got good quality external amenity space that's meeting our standards. The only slight flaw that you could contribute to that is in relation to the provision of access to the rear. Again, I don't see that that's the sound reason for refusal in this instance. I just do want to briefly touch on the parking side of matters, because that is, as people have alluded to, the site is in an accessibility zone 3, and the parking requirements associated with that would require 4.5 spaces. The parking standards and the accessibility zones, in my view, are quite generalised in respect of towns outside of the key town of Hemel Hempstead. There is a strong case to suggest that the site is a more sustainable location than that standard would suggest. It is 80 metres from a bus stop. The train station is 1 kilometre away and on a relatively flat walk. So that Again, places, you know, very limited weight in my view in terms of shortfall of parking provision. Certainly I would make the argument that it's quite a sustainable location. We should be applying accessibility parking standards to that, which it would well meet. So those, I think, we're addressing, I think, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going a bit over old ground, but I do have serious concerns about the access to the rear. I mean, maintenance at some point will be required. You can't build a house and expect it never to have to get on the roof at the back or do any maintenance to windows. And without being able to get to it, without bringing ladders or the paraphernalia through the house, I think is absolutely nuts. Bicycles, yeah, fine. I certainly been married 33 years, and when we first got married, I don't think I'd stay married very long if I'd wheeled my bicycle to the house covered in mud. It just isn't practical. My concern is that we seem to be looking at things tonight, and generally that we keep coming back to, we have a lack of housing. And a lack of housing is not an excuse to build things which are not appropriate. We have to be sensible here. You could take one unit away and build two. Slightly bigger, give access to the back, your development costs, of course, will change big time, but you would provide a scheme that people, I think, would probably want to live in, and it would satisfy 90% of the things we discussed tonight. 3 units, just, I think, is, and I will say it, and you can minute it, I think it is nuts, with no rear access. And for that reason, I cannot support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. If there are no further speakers, the officer recommendation is to delegate with a view to approval. So is there a proposer for the officer recommendation? Yes, Councillor Patterson. Is there a seconder? That application, that motion falls for lack of a seconder. So we now need to have a motion to refuse with reasons. So is anyone going to propose a motion to refuse with reasons? Perhaps Phil and Rob, you can actually give advice on material planning reasons for refusal.
So obviously just listening to the debate, it seems to have predominantly focused on two aspects. One is the inability of the occupiers to access their rear garden. There is the policy in Appendix 3, which talks about that there should be, it doesn't say must be, but there should be sufficient space around residential buildings to ensure movement around the building for maintenance and other purposes. And then the other aspect that's been raised by members is in relation to parking. And the argument made by officers is that due to the sustainable location, an exception could be made to the SBD parking standards. However, members have raised the point that it doesn't meet the SBD parking standards, taking into account the accessibility zone it is within. So, so they're the two reasons that have been discussed by members this evening, and that there is, in terms of the rear access, the policy support for that would be Appendix 3, and for the parking, that would be Policy CS 12.
Chair.
Councillor Riddick.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I think there was one other point I did mention, that was the refuse storage where it is, and it's located too far away from the pickup point in the high street.
I will need to defer to Robert in the first instance to understand the comments of the Clean, Safe and Green team in that regard.
There weren't any concerns raised by the Hertfordshire Highways in respect of the carry distance for bins storage. I believe that is within acceptable limits, albeit they would require to be accessed via the pathway adjacent to that gate and take bins through that location. But I think it's in an acceptable travel distance. So
Well, our Cupid Green team wouldn't collect from where they got those bins located. No chance. They're far too far away from the high street collection point. They wouldn't do it. And they couldn't put a refuse truck down there to pick it up and turn round either.
Councillor Riddick, I can understand how you're raising the issue of bins, but if Rob can give an answer to your question. If not, then we've got 2 reasons for refusal already. Some years ago, I went to planning training, and the trainer said, you'll need 1 reason. It's better to have 1 strong reason than 10 weak ones. So I don't feel on Rob if you're able to answer Councillor Riddick's question.
So in terms of the bin collection, again, I would need to defer to Robert in terms of the positioning of the bins and whether that's an acceptable location in terms of how Clean, Safe and Green would approach them, and the distance that, if not, that residents would have to carry these bins, whether that's within normal standards. But there would be regardless of that reason, there is the need for a 3rd reason for refusal, and that relates to the Chiltern Beechwoods SAC, because if we are refusing the development, we must include the absence of mitigation to deal with the harms arising from that. So it is kind of a technical refusal, but we would need to add that as a 3rd reason, and then I will need to be guided by Robert in terms of the bin storage.
yes, so I will go on to the highways actual representations, which does talk about vehicles being able to get within 25 metres of a bin store location, which they can from the high street. And residents should not carry their waste more than 30 metres to this location, which they clearly don't have to in this instance. So that is an acceptable bin storage location in highways terms.
Thank you that we've clarified about the bin storage. Then, Phil, you mentioned Chiltern Beechwoods, so have you got any advice about that? Then I'll bring in Councillor Bromham.
And was there simply that a 3rd reason for refusal must relate to the absence of mitigation to overcome the harms arising from the proposal for new dwellings on the Chiltern Beechwoods SAC. So that would need to be a 3rd reason for refusal, in addition to the rear access points and the parking shortfall point.
Councillor Bromham, then we'd look to have a proposer and seconder for this.
Yes, it looks the pavement is actually quite wide. It's not clear exactly who it belongs to. Presumably it's in public ownership, but so there is quite a lot of space there for putting the bins out. So that wouldn't be my main concern. But for me, the lack of access to the rear of the houses, which do have quite reasonable size back gardens, seems to be a major failure point. I've come across situations where maintenance was needed at the back of a house and they'd have to take down the neighbour's fence to get through, and that sort of thing wouldn't be possible here by the look of it. There are other configurations which have been mentioned which could well work. 2 dwellings, or just reconfigure them, or have a tunnel through with a shared path or something. Shouldn't be that hard to design. So I'm not. So that's my reason for not being being against this application.
Thank you. Councillor Brougham, you being against it, are you proposing a motion to refuse?
Yes.
So proposer and Councillor Brougham, is there a seconder? Councillor Patterson says propose, Councillor Brougham, so you're proposing a motion to refuse. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder for the motion to refuse it? Yes, our Councillor Riddick. So we have proposed to refuse in Councillor Brougham, a seconder and Councillor Riddick. All in favour of refusal, please raise your hands. 6 in favour. All against, please raise your hands. 1 against and 1 abstention. So that is refused. Then brings us on to 5.
We can just confirm, Chair, the reasons for refusal.
Phil, if you can confirm the reasons for refusal, because we're going to need to have those recorded.
Yep. I believe it was clear that members were aware that they were voting for refusal on 3 grounds: rear access, parking, and Chilterns SAC.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying the reasons for refusal. Then the next application is 5F, which is the case officer for which is Jane Miller. So, Jane, when you're ready. 5F Foxtrot, which is on page, starts on page 349 of the reports pack. So that says playing musical chairs. So it's 5F. When you're ready, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a single-storey wraparound extension at 23 Valley Road, North Church. Next slide, please. The red outline indicates the site. The property is a 2-storey semi-detached dwelling. The area is characterised by 1950s and 1960s semi-detached properties located between the canal and the High Street to the south. Next slide, please. Here is the site plan, which clearly shows the extent of the single-storey rear extension, side and rear extension shaded in grey. Next slide, please. It is acknowledged that Berkhamsted Town Council have objected to the proposal as it extends across the width of the site. However, it's worth noting that a side extension highlighted in blue on this slide can be constructed under permitted development rights without formal planning permission, which would also extend over to the boundary with number 21, which would remove pedestrian access to the rear garden. It's also worth noting that there is room for bin storage at the front of the dwelling, but set away from the highway. Next stage. There's a culverted section of the River Bourne that extends along Valley Road to the front of this site, which is shown in blue. Following on from initial concerns raised, on receipt of this plan from the agent, the Environment Agency removed their initial objection as the plan illustrates that the culverted section is in excess of 8 metres from the proposed extension, which is an acceptable distance. Next slide, please. Here's the existing and proposed ground floor plans. Existing on the left, the garage shown within the rear garden on the existing plans will be removed, and the proposed on the right. It's existing and proposed first floor plan, and it's clear to see the extent of the roof over the proposed wraparound extension. Existing and proposed roof plan. Here's the existing and proposed front elevations. The existing garage can be seen on the left, which is set back from the front elevation, and the proposed extension on the right. Next slide, please. And the existing and proposed rear elevation showing the single-storey addition on the right. Here's the side elevation from the non-adjoining neighbour, number 21. And from the west side from number 25, the adjoining neighbour. Next slide, please. Here are some of my site photos. You've got number 21 to the left and number 23, the application site on the right, which has the darker wooden gate. Next slide, please. Here's some photos from the rear showing the relationship with number 21, the neighbour. Some photos of the garage at the rear, which is to be removed, currently along the shared boundary. And some photos from the rear showing the relationship with number 25 and their existing single-storey rear extension. That's the attached dwelling on the left. Officer recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. We have speakers on this one. The first speaker is Councillor Garrick Stevens, who's speaking as a Berkhamsted Town Councillor. So in which capacity you have 3 minutes, Councillor Stevens. So when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, this is another application that fails to retain external access to the rear of the property and breaches Appendix 3 of the borough's policy on access. You will have noted that a previous application was for an extension to the rear in 2010, which has never followed through, and that retained the driveway to the garage. The Planning Committee did not have any issue with the principle of the demolition of the garage to enable enlargement of the dwelling. But as you will see, this proposes a side extension that makes it a full width across the driveway and fails to retain even a 1 metre gap to the adjacent boundary. And you've been told what the fallback position is that under LDP, that they could go to the boundary if they wanted to. Anyway, as a result of going full width, access to the rear would only be through the dwelling. We should note the borough and the county both have policies to preserve access to the rear. In the county's case, it's specifically mentioned for cycle storage. And given the direction of travel to encourage cycling and walking, we should avoid introducing obstacles to those ambitions. Allowing a full width enlargement of the property is a breach of the policy intended to preserve the amenity of its resident. We request this application is refused.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. The next speaker is Mr. Sukhdev Lota, who's speaking in support of the application. Mr. Lota, your microphone works where you're sitting. I see you've already got it switched on, so you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. I'd like to speak in support of the planning application for a single-storey side and rear extension at Valley Road. I'm here to address the concerns raised by the Parish Council and to demonstrate why this proposal is compliant with planning policies, supported by local precedent and suitable for approval. Firstly, the parish council has objected, claiming that the proposed side extension would take the property to full width, contravening the terracing policy. However, this concern is based off a misinterpretation of the relevant guidance. The Supplementary Planning Guidance, section 2611, clearly states the spacing requirements will not apply to single-storey extensions, as the visual effects of terracing arise mainly from extensions above the first floor. As this proposal is for a single-storey extension, the terracing policy does not apply. The design ensures no adverse visual impact or loss of openness, maintaining the character of the street scene in line with planning objectives. Furthermore, whilst the actual extension itself doesn't fall under permitted development rights, it's worth noting that permitted development allows single-storey side extensions up to the boundary. This demonstrates that the principle of the side extension as proposed is consistent with standard planning allowances, reinforcing its appropriateness for the site. Additionally, there is a clear precedent for such extensions along Valley Road. Properties such as number 12 and 20 Valley Road have similar single-storey side extensions up to the boundary, which have been successfully integrated without detriment to the characters area. These examples demonstrate that the proposed extension is consistent with the established pattern of development in the neighbourhood, reinforcing its suitability. The Parish Council also noted concerns from the Environmental Agency regarding the proximity of the extension to the River Bulbourne culvert. I'm pleased to clarify that the Environmental Agency has reviewed the updated plans and confirmed that the development is located well within safe limits of the culvert. Following this review, the Environmental Agency has withdrawn their objection, confirming that the proposal poses no risk to the culvert or local flood management. In conclusion, the proposed single-storey extension at 23 Valley Road complies with relevant planning policies and is supported by local precedent. Parish Council's concerns about terracing are not applicable, and the Environmental Agency's issues have been fully addressed. I hope the committee agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loter, and thank you for keeping to time. Now it's over to the committee for questions and comments. Are there any questions and comments from the committee? The officer recommendation is to grant. Is there a proposer for the officer recommendation?
Sorry, I've got a late question, if that's all right, Chair.
Of course it is, Councillor Allen. Fire away.
So I just wanted to explore this seemingly contradiction between what Councillor Stevens said about what was it, Appendix 3, and the applicant came out with a contrary view on this. I wanted to know what the officer's view was on those two conflicting positions.
I think there are two different policy being brought up here. One is the talking about cramping at first floor, which obviously doesn't apply to this. And the second would be the saved Appendix 3, which specifically mentions access, I think it's access to the rear, which was discussed on the previous application. But as I pointed out, the side extension can be built under permitted development rights in any case on this site.
Thank you. And if I may, what's the significance of the precedents elsewhere in the street? Is that something that we need to take into account?
There are plenty of other examples around Berkhamsted where such extensions have taken place under permitted development or through planning applications. As the agent has pointed out, there are several on Valley Road itself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? If there are no further questions or comments, the officer recommendation is to grant. Is there a proposer for the officer recommendation? This is Councillor Patterson. Is there a seconder? Councillor White-Low. All in favour, please raise your hands. That's 6 in favour. All against, please raise your hands. All abstentions, please raise your hands. So that is granted, and it's musical chairs time as Councillor Stevens retakes the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Right, the next one is item 5D, 00157, the new dwelling land off Kings Lane, Chipperfield. And Heather, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So before I start, I'd just like to make members aware of the addendum. So there's recommendations for 2 conditions to be added in accordance with comments that were received from the county ecologist. And these have been agreed with the agent. And there are some suggested amendments to the committee report, mainly to the Chilterns Beechwood SAC section, just as we require delegated authority to complete a final appropriate assessment. So moving on to the scheme. So the application is for new dwelling, land off Kings Lane in Chipperfield. Next slide, please. So the site comprises land between properties Broom Cottage, Little Meadow and Old Cottage fronting Kings Lane in Chipperfield. So the site falls within the small village of Chipperfield. It's within the Greenbelt and within the Chipperfield Conservation Area. And as mentioned, permission is sought for the construction of a new dwelling. So there was a previous scheme for similar works, but this application was withdrawn due to concerns with the proposed new access and with the proposal's design. The applicant has engaged in pre-application discussions with the council, the conservation and design team, and separately with the Highways Authority to resolve these issues. And it is considered that these issues have now been resolved. So the application is presented to the committee as the parish council have raised objection to the scheme. The key concerns relating to parking, affordable housing, design, heritage impacts, and highways safety issues. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows the proposed site plan. So you can see that the new dwelling would sit between neighbouring properties Broom Cottage and Little Meadow. It would be served by 4 off-street car parking spaces to the front of the site, which is in accordance with the council's parking standards, and would be served by a long private rear garden. So one of the objections raised by the parish council relates to affordable housing, and this issue is discussed in paragraph 9.8 of the report. But fundamentally, I just wanted to make the point that there is conflict between national planning policy and policy CS6 of the core strategy. But under this scheme, we're not able to secure affordable housing because this is contrary to national planning policy. And also, I just wanted to make the point whilst we're looking at this slide that there is harm to the Chipperfield Conservation Area by way of the loss of the gap between the 2 properties, which is acknowledged in the Chipperfield Character Appraisal Area as being important. But this harm is categorised as being at less than substantial harm at the lower end, and it is felt that the benefits of the scheme, predominantly the provision of a new dwelling, would outweigh this harm, and this is considered in paragraph 9.24 of the committee report. Next slide, please. So the next slides just show the proposed elevations. So this is the proposed front elevation. The dotted red lines show the outline of the previous scheme. You can see that the overall bulk of the property has been reduced as a result of the pre-application discussions. The conservation team are now happy with the design, and you can now see that the property sits more comfortably between Broom Cottage and Little Meadow. So next slide, please. So this is the proposed rear elevation. Again, you can see the red dotted lines just showing the amendments to the scheme. Next slide, please. This slide shows the side elevation facing towards Little Meadow. Again, you can see the substantial differences between the previous and current scheme. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed side elevation facing towards Broome Cottage. Again, you can see the significant amendments to the bulk and overall scale of the property. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the proposed floor plans. Next slide, please. So the next set of slides are site photos. So this photo shows views into the site from Kings Lane. This slide shows images taken within the site. So on the left-hand image, you can see Little Meadow, and on the right-hand image, you can see Broome Cottage. Yeah, so this slide shows views looking towards Little Meadow, just taken from different angles. And this slide shows site photos looking towards Broome Cottage. So this slide just shows the first image shows a side boundary image, and the second and third images show views towards the rear boundary of the site. So this photo shows the existing access onto Kings Lane, and it's proposed that this would be utilised for the new dwelling. So one of the concerns raised was related to highways issues. The Highways Authority have, however, confirmed that this arrangement is acceptable and will secure safe and sufficient access, and they have removed their objection to the scheme. Next slide, please. So in summary, it's recommended that the application be delegated with a view to approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report, as well as the additional conditions set out in the addendum. Delegated authority is also sought to allow officers to complete a final appropriate assessment and secure a unilateral undertaking securing financial contributions to mitigate harm to the Chilterns Beechwood SAC. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We've got 3 speakers on this application. The first one is Richard Simpson, then Councillor Bryant, and then Councillor Mr. Wetham.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak in objection to this application today. While development plays a key role in meeting housing needs, this proposal fundamentally fails to comply with key planning policies and would cause considerable harm to both the surrounding conservation area and the amenity of local residents. Firstly, the principle of development does not meet the presumption in favour of sustainable development. The Quorum Council has a duty to deliver housing, but proposals must adhere to the local plan and national protections. This site is within the Greenbelt and the Chipperfield Conservation Area, areas where inappropriate development should be refused unless exceptional circumstances exist. In this case, the harm to local character and environmental integrity far outweighs any suggested benefits. Secondly, Greenbelt protections must be upheld. The proposal does not meet the exceptions listed in the MPPF or Quorum's core strategy. It fails to provide affordable housing, contradicting policy CS6 and threatening the openness of the Greenbelt. A previous appeal decision made before the core strategy was adopted cannot be relied upon as justification for this development. The proposed infilling disrupts the local landscape, contributes to urban encroachment, and conflicts with the fundamental aim of the Greenbelt policy, i.e. to keep land permanently open. Next is the impact on biodiversity and trees, which is deeply concerning. The proposal involves excessive tree works within a conservation area, undermining both environmental stability and local character. The accompanying ecological survey was conducted outside the optimal assessment period, meaning that it fails to provide a full picture of the site's biodiversity. The character and appearance of Chipperfield Conservation Area would be irreparably damaged. The site currently provides an important gap between built forms, contributing to the openness of Kings Lane. The proposed dwelling is cramped, overextended, and fails to integrate sympathetically with its surroundings. Moreover, the impact on neighbouring properties is also unacceptable. The proposal's scale and positioning would result in an overbearing relationship with adjacent homes, particularly Little Meadow, with a significant loss of privacy and visual intrusion, contrary to policy CS11. Highway safety is also compromised. The proposed access lacks the required visibility displays, which extend beyond the applicant's control and are obstructed by trees and boundary planting, increasing the risk to road users. Finally, we feel there's been serious procedural failings undermining the integrity of this application, as key public objections were withheld from the consultation process, breaching transparency obligations. Additionally, not all landowners, including Kingsmead, were properly notified, and the red line boundary includes third party land without the necessary legal consent.
We look as if we've overrun.
In conclusion, this proposal conflicts with national and local planning policies, and we respectfully request this refused.
Right. I think we move on to the next speaker. Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Bryant. Mr. Patton.
Oh, the other one. Good evening, councillors. I'm speaking to you on behalf of CPC, Chipperfield Parish Council. Our appearances before you are relatively rare, indicating the strength of feeling within our village for this particular matter. And therefore, we hope this will add some weight to the views I'm going to express. Firstly, we agree with the case officer about housing need in Chipperfield. However, we wholly disagree that this scheme is an appropriate remedy to meet that need. And let me explain why. 4 years ago, CPC published the result of a housing needs survey conducted by the council with guidance from CDA. The work of CDA was funded by DBC and a housing association. And the headline result of this survey was the need for 38 dwelling units, of which 33 are for 1 and 2 bedroom units, 5 for 3 bedroom units, and 0 for anything larger. In summary, the demand is from next generation, for example, children of existing residents and downsizers within the older age groups. Since then, CPC has sought to engage with DBC to work together to identify potential sites for an initial scheme of perhaps 5 or 6 dwellings. Unfortunately, there's been no progress of any note. And perhaps this is part of the reason that CPC has received so many objections from the villagers to this particular scheme, along the lines of wrong solution in the wrong place. Many objections have also cited the historical importance of the land in the centre of the village, of which this site is a small part. There has been a recent application at another part of this historic land by the same applicant. This application was refused and a subsequent appeal dismissed. The appeal inspector wrote in great detail of the importance of the open land in the centre of the village and its conservation area of which this site is part. The inspector stated that the significance of the Chipperfield conservation area is derived in part from the quality of its buildings and the sense of rural openness, and goes on to state the importance of having open space that punctuates existing development. And the application site before you similarly does exactly that. It punctuates existing development along King's Lane with a narrow green sliver of open space that ought to be cherished, nurtured and preserved. So I hope this has given you a slightly fresh perspective on this scheme, and we urge you to refuse an inappropriate development within the green belt. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Mr. Wedham.
Thank you very much. Ed Wetton from Laxton Properties. We're a Berkhamsted-based development company. We've been promoting this bit of land for a while, as just been referred to, and as part of this process, we've already heard about the withdrawn planning application that we submitted. We've met with the Parish Council twice, and we've got a good relationship, even if we don't have the same views. And we've held pre-apps with planning officers, heritage officers, and Herts Highways. We've looked to do the right thing in the right way by hearing the concerns and responding where we can. You've seen how that's led to a significant reduction in the proposed dwelling on the site, and we feel that what we've been left with is still very much an appropriate house that will provide a small but valuable contribution to housing stock. If I deal with some of the specific comments that have been raised, the principle of development has been discussed already. It's an infill site within a village, within the green belt. I think the officer dealt with the question of affordable housing and that there is no requirement for affordable housing on it, despite historic policy. I'm conscious that I'm biased, of course. I'm going to put the best spin on things. I'll use your officer's words on various other factors. So the impact on character and appearance of the area. The officer notes that the property would now sit comfortably between existing properties, integrating within the streetscape character. The conservation officer has confirmed that there is no problem in terms of the design of it, and with regards to the impact on the conservation area, notes that any harm is less than substantial and at the lower end. That's at the lowest possible form of impact from a heritage perspective. That brings it into the planning balance, and the officer has confirmed her opinion that in the planning balance, the benefits from this development, including the fact that it's a new property in a situation where you have a very low housing land supply, outweigh the small disbenefit that is identified in heritage terms. With regards to highways, again, your highways colleagues have confirmed that there is no objection on highways grounds. It is noted that there is no accident record locally, and whilst there isn't ideal visibility space in either direction, it's the existing arrangement and it mirrors what's already in place for other properties up and down the road. So, in short, there are no statutory objections to the proposal. There is a degree of local concern, and I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that some of that has been misrepresented. So the neighbour immediately adjacent to the property had an objection put in their name, which was, well, frankly, fraudulent. She then wrote to us and to the planning officer to confirm that wasn't her. So I don't know how much of any objections are fully legitimate because of that particular factor. Regardless, I don't think that there are any planning policy reasons for this application to be refused. Thank you.
Thank you for keeping to time. Right, members, over to you. Councillor Allen.
I just want to explore the listed building and conservation aspect. Looking at a map of the area, in particular the listed buildings in central Chipperfield, this is one strip of a gap in a row of housing going from Chapel Croft all the way round King's Lane, which is got housing all along the way except for this one. Is this a case of trying to close the stable door after the horse has bolted? If there's last strip that gives some little insight into the field, the field pattern historically. How weighty is that as a conservation issue?
So in terms of the significance of the gap, so there is commentary in my report that discusses this. So I'll just refer to that because that's probably the easiest way to explain it. So the significance of the plot is that it's a surviving element of the former field pattern and the evidence of the agricultural use of the land and its track running from Pale Farm across the fields to King's Lane and pre the mid-19th century across into the land on the other side of the lane. So it is identified as being a significant plot, but fundamentally the harm of the loss of that gap is concluded to be at less than substantial level at the lowest end of harm. So we need to balance that with all the benefits of the scheme. And because that harm is at such a low level, some of the benefits of the scheme in terms of the provision of new housing in the face of our housing land supply, in my view, significantly outweighs that. So it is a consideration that you need to take into account, but you need to kind of balance that against the benefits of the scheme and determine whether the harm of the loss of that gap outweighs the benefits of the scheme.
Thank you. Exploring the affordable homes aspect, is there any reason why the borough and Chipperfield Parish Council haven't liaised on such sites to make sure that they're made available for, the young people that are coming through in the village? You may not be able to answer that, but it seems like it's a bit of a shame that the lack of contact between the borough and the village on identifying sites is used in a discussion when there's no reason why this shouldn't be used for such progress.
I can't really comment.
Just an observation, Chair. I think it's a shame.
Councillor Allen.
A couple of probably small points is there's some references from the objectors to this being some sort of access route into the sort of centre of the, basically a rectangle. So I don't know if there's ever been an official access route through here which leads to the open land which still remains within the rectangle, which is otherwise developed all around the sides of it.
So the site did used to provide access. My understanding is that it's underutilised at the moment and that there would be access from the other side of the field. Mm-hmm. So the loss of the access isn't considered to be a significant issue. And this is something that I actually received comments from the fire safety officer, and they've confirmed that the arrangements are acceptable and the provision of access will allow accessibility for appliances and water in the event of a fire. So fundamentally, the loss of the access from King's Lane is not considered to be detrimental.
Okay. The other thing was that there was an application refused back in 2012 for a detached dwelling like this one, but permission was refused on design and affordable housing grounds. Now, that's presumably been dropped because of the problem that there is at the moment in a housing supply. Am I right in thinking affordable housing is no longer as relevant as it probably ought to be because of the lack of housing supply?
So it's not to do with the housing supply, it's to do with the change in national policy. So it was something that was needed to be secured under policy CS6, but this isn't a requirement under national planning policy. So we have issued some affordable housing supplementary planning guidance that deals with this issue. But fundamentally, the position is that we can't secure affordable housing for these types of infill schemes just because that is contradictory to national planning policy.
Okay. Okay, well, Chair, I think I'm happy to propose that we agree with the officer's proposal to.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We'll park that for the moment. Does anybody else want to make a comment? So with Councillor Patterson's proposals that we accept officer's recommendation, do I have a seconder? I think Councillor Bristow got that just before you, Councillor Whitelow. So with officer's recommendation being proposed and seconded, can I have a show of hands, please? Those against, please show of hands. No. Would you like to show your vote again, please? Show of hands. In favour? In favour. 3, 4, 5. Thank you. 5 in favour. Abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, and me. 4 abstentions. So with that, officer's recommendation is carried. Now, Councillor Guest.
Councillor Stevenson, in terms of the council's constitution, at 10, we have to take a vote on whether to carry on to 10:30, and at 10:30 is the cut-off time. We finish that item and everything else gets deferred.
I thought you were about to say that, just moments ahead of my comment on this as well. We're coming up to 10:30. We've got a number of items on the agenda. And judging by the importance of the various applications, I don't think we can cover the applications in 10 minutes. We've got a speaker for 5G also on the agenda, so we wouldn't be able to cover that in 10 minutes. So, Phil, can I suggest that we consider deferring those?
Yes, I mean, if the Constitution has a strict cut-off point of half past 10, or does it allow the commencement, but obviously that item could be continued after 10:30. So in that regard, we would have time for one more item, but I need guidance on the interpretation of the Constitution, whether it's a strict 10:30 cut-off.
Councillor Allen.
I wonder, given that there is a speaker who's taken the effort to come out this evening and sit through this long meeting, it'd be a shame to send them home without having heard them.
Right, in which case, I think we go for it's 5G, isn't it? Oh, we've got 5E, but we don't have a speaker on 5E, but we've got a speaker on 5G.
Chair, can I just confirm, you're happy to continue, are you? The one that does have a speaker, that particular one?
Yes, we do.
And the speakers are all here today? Yep. Mm.
Right. Five E, Heather again.
So, Chair, so Councillor Madden today submitted a statement as a late item that I'll need to read out. Good evening. Having read the response from Herts Highways and scrutinised the plans for this application, I have this morning spoken to a member of Herts Highways and emailed the Director of Highways requesting a site visit by HCC. The Director of Highways explained at a County Council meeting last week that most of their comments on planning applications are based on a desktop analysis, and they welcome local members' knowledge if we disagree. The Highways officer I met today knows the local area extremely well and agreed with me that there should be further consideration of the planned parking within the site. With this in mind, I would request that this item is deferred until the next meeting to enable an expert opinion, possibly showing a swept path analysis, to ensure vehicles could actually access the site with cars parked on the street. I am requesting this in my capacity as both the local DBC Ward Councillor and HCC County Councillor, using my extreme knowledge of this road and surrounding area. So just quickly in response to that, ultimately it is a decision for members whether members decide they do need further information to cover off this parking accessibility point. However, it must be noted that the previous application was actually refused due to the absence of information in this regard in relation to tandem parking arrangements. But the planning inspector concluded that there were no highway safety implications arising from the tandem parking arrangements. So, as I say, ultimately it's for members' decisions whether to defer or not, but officers consider that there is sufficient information within the pack and the implications of the arrangement has been previously considered by an inspector. So if I can pass now to Heather.
Okay, thank you. So just before I start, I'll just draw members' attention again to the addendum. So there's some amendments to the report set out in there, as well as conditions and an amendment to the section for the Chilterns Beechwoods, again seeking delegated authority to complete a final appropriate assessment. So the application is for the construction of a proposed detached bungalow, and it's a self-build development, and this would be on land to the rear of 9 Chambersbury Lane in Hemel Hempstead. Next slide, please. So the site formerly formed part of the rear gardens of properties 9 and 11 Chambersbury Lane. The site falls within a residential area of Hemel Hempstead, and ground levels fall steeply from Chambersbury Lane towards Mill Close. So permission is sought for the construction of a new dwelling. There was a previous scheme for a similar detached bungalow. This was refused by the council on 2 grounds. So the first ground was that the development failed to secure high standards of residential amenity for future occupants. And the second was that there's insufficient information provided to demonstrate that the parking spaces could be safely accessed and that there would be no adverse highways impacts. So an appeal was submitted and dismissed. The inspector deemed the parking and access arrangements to be acceptable, but remained concerned on residential amenity grounds. And the key concern related to the fact that the site would be subject to overlooking from the rear windows of 9 Chambersbury Lane. So the application is at committee, as Parish Council have a contrary view to the case officer. The key reasons for objecting relate to the parking, highway safety issues, overlooking and overdevelopment. We're on the wrong slide. Can you go back to the proposed? Okay, no, just go to the next slide, sorry. Okay, so this slide shows comparisons between the previous scheme and the current scheme. So you can see the previous scheme on the left and the current scheme on the right. So the previous scheme was for a 3-bed detached bungalow, and the current scheme is for a 2-bed. As you can see, the form of the dwelling has been amended. It's now an L shape, and that would overcome the overlooking issue. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this slide just shows the comparison between the site layout. So you can see that the site layout is largely unchanged, with the exception of the L-shaped form of the dwelling, which would prevent overlooking from the rear windows of 9 Chambersbury Lane. So that private amenity space to the front of the L shape would not be subject to overlooking given the form of the dwelling. You can see the parking arrangements would remain unchanged. So there's 2 parking spaces in a tandem arrangement, and the area to the front of the parking area would provide manoeuvrability for those spaces. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed section plan. So you can see the line of sight from the rear windows of 9 Chambersbury Lane. As mentioned, the L-shaped form of the dwelling would prevent overlooking of that private amenity space. And this plan also shows the ground levels would be amended with the dwelling set on lower ground levels to reduce its prominence. Next slide, please. So these next slides are just going to show the proposed scheme in isolation, in case members want to look at these. So again, you've got the site plan on the left and the roof form on the right, again, just showing that L-shaped form. You've got the front elevation on the left and the rear elevation on the right. And then the side elevations are shown on this plan. So next are the site photos. So these photos show the rear garden of 9 Chambersbury Lane. Next slide. These are photos that I took from the rear window of 9 Chambersbury Lane. So at the moment, well, when I took these photos, there was an established soft planted boundary that prevented any views from being obtained. But as the inspector referenced under the appeal decision, this can't be relied upon, and this is why the design of the dwelling has been amended. Next slide, please. So these photos show views of the front of the site. So this is looking towards the site from Mill Close. So you can see that the front of the site is currently has a low boundary brick wall and is topped with fencing. Next slide, please. And these are further views of the front of the site, just from a slightly different angle. So you get more of a view of Mill Close. And these photos are views from within the site. Next slide, please. So it's recommended that the application be approved, subject to the recommendation set out in the report and subject to delegated authority to complete a final appropriate assessment. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. Councillor Allen.
Yes, could you just talk through the parking reasons for the previous refusal? Oh, sorry.
Good evening. Contrary to the officer's opinion, National Parish Council maintains that what would seem to amount to burying a bungalow in the garden of adjacent properties would not provide high standards of residential amenity, nor good quality private amenity space for future residents. This type of development should not be the answer to any lack of forecast housing supply. However, our greatest concern is yet again parking. As is our duty, we have reviewed this application on behalf of the parish residents, and as with all applications of this type, we have carried out a detailed assessment of the parking impact, given that this is one of the most frequent concerns raised by parish residents generally, and your report pack shows the specific comments from neighbouring properties. It is well documented that Nash Mills suffers from significant parking stress. The lack of capacity within Nash Mills Wharf has forced parking overflow into surrounding streets, to the detriment of the residents of those streets, and this certainly includes Nash Green and Mill Close, which would be the frontage for the proposed development. No further development should be permitted, which would add to this stress. Since the last application for this site, which was refused by DBC and subsequently considered by the Planning Inspectorate, there have been some significant parking changes locally, and we consider these to be a material consideration. This being the introduction of yellow lines in Red Lion Lane and the entrance to Nash Green and Mill Close, a net loss of up to 60 spaces. Whilst these yellow lines brought some safety benefits, they exacerbated the problem around the site of this proposal, since they pushed the Nash Mills Wharf overflow further up Mill Close. Too often, the on-street parking stress is assessed during working days, when the real parking stress occurs in evenings and during weekends. Your addendum contains photos from Monday evening this week showing that indisputably the usage of on-street parking, which is effectively to capacity. The effect of removing 2 on-street parking spaces would have an adverse impact on the local community, and in our view does not outweigh the officer's view of the benefits of the scheme. The report states, it is therefore acknowledged that the loss of on-street parking is not ideal, and the Parish Council considers that to be a major understatement. Whilst you might consider that it's just 1 or 2 spaces lost, the cumulative impact of these just one more space situations should not be allowed to continue. Nash Mills Parish Council urges you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent timing. Now, Councillor Allen.
Yes, I mean, with the diagram up, would it be possible to talk us through the parking considerations that led to the refusal last time? And what is different on this application?
So under the previous scheme, there were concerns about this tandem parking arrangement because it is quite a small strip of parking that's provided. So I did have concerns about whether future occupants would be able to safely access and leave those spaces. and that was one of the reasons for refusing the previous scheme. The inspector didn't agree. I can read out their conclusion, but fundamentally their view was that traffic speeds would be low and that any harm generated by this parking arrangement wouldn't be at a level that would warrant refusal of the scheme. In terms of loss of on-street parking, so there would be the loss of a single space by way of the creation of that new access. In my view, that harm wouldn't be at a level to warrant refusal of the scheme. There's no policy under which we can protect on-street parking, whilst I acknowledge that this is an area with high parking stress. It is a balancing act, and we kind of need to weigh up the benefits of the development against the harm of that loss of a single space, which in my view isn't significantly harmful.
Thank you. And so the access on the current scheme is where that black line is, the thick black line? Okay, and how does that thick black line relate to the pictures that you showed where there was a wall and then an open area?
So the picture you can see here is the front of the site. So that low boundary brick wall, that would all be removed to create that access, and the rest of it would be open.
So where the brick wall is where that thick black line access point is?
Yeah, it wouldn't extend the full length of the brick wall. I think it's 5 metres wide on the plan. But yes, it would. The brick wall would be removed and the access would be created in that location.
Thank you.
Any further comments? In which case, do I have someone to propose officer's recommendation? Councillor Wyatt Lowe. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bristow. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in favour. Those against? No against. Abstentions? 1, 2, 3. 3 abstentions. Officer's recommendation is carried. Right, now the time is 10:35. We adjourn?
My understanding is that we can't start an item after 10:30.
We have the former vice chair saying, yes, that's the procedures that we've had in the past.
Chair, I'm just trying to find it in the Constitution, and I'm afraid I'm finding it a bit difficult. I haven't found it yet, that section, but if the Vice Chair is saying that that is what has happened in the past, and she's aware of that, then I would actually, on this occasion, probably accept that. Councillor Whitelow, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was. Excuse me, Fiona. In the past, this was actually it was agreed by the committee at the time that it was not a particularly wise thing to do to carry on after 10:30, and it was by the agreement of the committee that it has become common practice. And
Okay, so it's not something that's in the Constitution, but that's something that the committee has decided.
About the Constitution, I can just tell you how it operates with the committee.
Okay, Chair, that might explain why I can't find it.
So in fact, it's become practice, right? It's a shame we've brought two items on the agenda, one of which is fairly straightforward. Councillor Whitelow.
What usually happens then is that the chairman asks the committee whether they want to proceed with the two remaining items or whether they want to go home.
Right. Being democratic, question. Do we want to proceed with this item 5G and then item 6, which is to note the appeals? Do you want to go quit or do you want to go home? Councillor Whitelow.
I think if everybody gives the matter due consideration, we can consider the outstanding planning item very quickly. And then I'm sure Phil would also consider the his part of the action very quickly, perhaps, and then we can clear the decks, as it were. But that would be down to my colleagues.
I think Councillor Whitelow is being very persuasive here. Go for it? Yeah. Right, go. Right.
Yeah, I mean, my thought is that we shouldn't really start an item after 10:30 for that very reason, in terms of tiredness and robustness of decision making. The only thing I would ask is that obviously item 6 isn't a decision; it's purely to note the report. To avoid that coming back in the June committee when we potentially have a busy agenda, if members could simply note item 6. And if they do have any questions for me, I would be very happy to take them by email.
Thank you for that. Can we just note item 6? And we're going to defer 5G to